to Parks Forward. If you can take your seats, and commissioners can take their seats. We're going to get our name cards all straightened out. Good morning. I'm delighted. Welcome to every member of the public that's here. We're delighted to have you join us, and we're eager to hear your comments on our first iteration of our Parks Forward recommendations. My name's Christine Kehoe. I'm the co-chair of the Parks Forward Commission along with Lance Kahn, and we want to extend our welcome to you. I will turn it over to Lance in just a moment, but I'd first like to say we really appreciate the Commissioner's work in putting this first draft together, and the support and our support team for all the work that they've done to get this document to us this morning. But this document is not finished. We are going to continue to work on the recommendations on focus and priority for the steps that need to be taken to truly bring our Parks Department into the 21st century. We know the work is not finished, but we're eager to hear your response so that we can incorporate your thoughts and recommendations into the conversations that we're having as we develop this document. So I'm going to ask my co-chair Lance Kahn to say good morning, and then we'll go through the agenda.
Thank you, Chris. I just want to echo Chris's comments. There's been a tremendous amount of effort from tens, if not hundreds, of people that has resulted in the draft report that you all see before you. And just to underscore what Chris said, the Commission, by and large, is seeing this report at the same time the public is. And so we are also reviewing and responding, and a part of our deliberative, a key part of our deliberative process is hearing from you. And so you'll see in our agenda later, we're going to flip our usual approach to these meetings, and after the initial part of our agenda and our speaker, we're going to open up for public comment for an extended period of time, because we're very eager to hear people's thoughts. This is obviously the next step in the iteration of our thinking and our report. We expect there will be many other meetings and discussions in the following weeks and months as we continue to refine our thinking and sort of move towards a finalized version of our recommendations. So, Chris, do you want to?
Thanks, Lance. I guess I'm going to be fooling with that button all day. We have a really dedicated group of citizen volunteers on the Commission, and I'd like each of them to introduce themselves this morning and maybe say what part of the state you're from, since we're geographically diverse. Carol Hart.
Hi, I'm Carol Hart. I'm from Sonoma County, California.
Gonzalez, from Mendocino County, California.
I'm Steve Lockhart. I'm from the other side of that beautiful bridge in the bay, so I'm from Oakland, California.
Chris Kehoe from San Diego.
Lance Kahn from down on the peninsula.
Julie Packard, Monterey Bay area.
In the center of Toby.
There. Sorry. Toby Rosenblatt. I live in San Francisco.
Michael Wu from Los Angeles. And we have John Reynolds Skyping in from Virginia, and I think if you can...
Just by phone, I guess.
There he is, right there on the screen.
Oh, there he is. Hey, good morning. So, John, introduce yourself.
Retired from the next Park Service. Used to live in the Bay Area and now live near Charlottesville, Virginia. And the picture you see behind you is Pipestone National Monument.
A true parks advocate. Okay. Thank you, John. Good morning. Hope your knee is on the mend. So we're going to move on to the update on the Parks Forward Initiative activities and our upcoming schedule. Ken Weisman, our Executive Director, is going to take us through this. Ken?
Thank you, Chris. As our co-chair said, this is what you have before you is a staff working draft. We spent a lot of time as our team, which includes a lot of park executives in the Parks Department now, as well as retired executives from the Parks Department, as part of our staff team, as we've been working and listening to the commissioners and putting this together as this working draft. As we've reached out and tried to listen and catch your reflections, we know we've captured it somewhat, but we also know that talking to you that there's still edits to be had and adjustments to be made. And as the chair said, this was an opportunity to engage the public first before then they kind of walk through, and you'll see where we decided to everybody who's kind of had an interest or been able to take a lead with the discussion has the opportunity to then respond to what the public comment has been, and that helps us capture what our commission wants. I think it's become very clear to us as we've worked this that the report is bigger than they want it to be. We want to focus on the things that are the recommendations of the commission, how we're going to get it done, when we're going to get it done, and how we're going to measure it. And what we're hearing from the commission is that they want the time to do that and time to work on a report that will be very focused, very tight, and very directive. That's going to take some time, and we had scheduled to wrap up in August. That we do not believe is going to happen or should happen. There may be a meeting in August. We don't want to have our next meeting until we have a product that the commission can put out for comment and interaction with the public. So whether we do the August 6th date as scheduled now or do something in September, our plan is to make sure that the commission has had adequate time to really reflect and make it their report. And then probably to have an adoption meeting a month after that, but wanting to really have the report, get all the public input, continue to do this very open and engaging process that we have. Our plan is to have go back to parks employees, do some focus groups in May, go to the public in June, have public hearings, Los Angeles, Sacramento, San Rafael, much as we did in the front end, again gathering public reaction to this that the commissioners can then add to their thinking and get as much input as possible from all areas. So that's our plan forward, and we think that we're in a position to capture all the good energy of the commissioners as well as the public and the department, and moving forward.
Thanks, Ken. Appreciate that. And we will we'll keep the public informed, and we do have a website. Our meeting schedule will be posted there, so you can stay up to date on that. We're going to move on to our next item. John Jarvis, the Director of the National Park Service, is with us. We're delighted to have you here, and very interested in hearing your thoughts on the work that we're doing and some of your good advice. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Do I have a clicker for the... Okay, thanks. Well, thank you, commissioners. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the National Park Service's Centennial, because I think in many ways it parallels the efforts and challenges that are faced by California State Park System, and I think it can help inform particularly the implementation side of this initiative. And I'm going to run through about 20 or so slides, and then I would really like to open it up for your questions that you may have about the work that we're doing together. Let me just say first and foremost that the National Park Service and the state park system have been nationwide, and maybe even more specifically California, have been together in this for the first century. No question. Certainly with, as we say, the establishment of the Mariposa Grove in Yosemite, which we've been taking care of for you ever since 1864. And
doing a fine job.
Thank you. But it did start the debate between Yosemite and Yellowstone, who was first. But our first director, Stephen Mather, was a Californian, and recognized early on that the national park system could never take care of all of the places that were necessary to provide conservation, historic preservation, and recreation for the American people, and there needed to be a state park system in every state. And he hosted the first State Park Conference in 1921. And then the National Park Service led a study of the needs for state parks systems and actually produced reports for 46 states to help plan, design, and then implement through the New Deal much of the work that was done in state parks. And so we've been together a long time. And then, as you may know, I served for 7 years here as the regional director with California and really built a great respect for the California State Park system and the employees and the work they do. And I am here today to offer whatever assistance we may can offer to help you achieve your goals. So I'm going to walk you through the Centennial. So in 2016, the National Park Service will be 100 years old, and I will have served 40 of those years. So I have a few opinions about what that future is going to be like. So it presents, in many ways, an opportunity to take on the challenges that I think are facing the California system or park systems nationwide, and frankly, park systems internationally. We're all in this together. And so I looked at the Centennial as a leverage, as a pivot point to rebuild the public support for the work that we do. Our work is really built upon a body of past work. We've had our own series of commissions, the Second Century Commission, which Steve Lockhart served on, Sally Jewell served on, our Secretary of Interior, and a number of other great citizens gave us a charge, not too dissimilar than what you were working on as well. But to be blunt about it, as I came on as the director, I decided I didn't need another commission to tell me what I needed to do. What I needed to do was to implement what had been told to the National Park Service basically over and over again through probably at least a dozen reports over the last 20 years. And it really was, first of all, identifying these same set of challenges that the California State Park System is dealing with, the changing demographics, declining budgets, and sequestration. Of course, we went through shutdown, an extraordinary maintenance backlog. Ours is at about $11 billion for the Park Service. Climate change, really changing the fundamental paradigm upon which we are operating, putting species and resources at risk, the whole issue of children and nature deficit, and then this sort of waning relevancy that we have with the American people. As a matter of fact, I actually think all of these are symptoms. They're not the problem. They are symptoms of a waning relevancy to the American people for what the work that we do, the services that we provide to the American people. One of the key components of sort of our findings is the public really doesn't understand the work that we do, and specifically in the National Park Service, we do more than manage parks. For instance, in the Historic Preservation Tax Credit Program, we do about $5 billion worth of reconstruction work in communities across the nation through preservation tax credit with the IRS and with developers, low-income housing, old theaters, revitalization of neighborhoods, and no one knows that. No one knows the Park Service does this work in communities across the nation. They still think we're 5 big parks in the West. And so making our case and branding our work at the community level is one of our key outcomes. So we've set up essentially 4 primary goals for the Centennial. They are connecting people to parks, which is really in many ways bringing the parks to the people. We have lived our first 100 years by essentially building parks and expecting people to come. But I think this next century is about bringing parks to the people. Our education role, the National Park Service is considered the largest informal education institution in the United States. Education, as I'm sure you know, is struggling on a number of fronts, and I think we have something to offer K through 12 and beyond, and the entire American people through informal education. Obviously, our stewardship of special places is incredibly important, but at the same time, the places that we are protecting aren't necessarily representing the contributions of all Americans. And then our own professional and organizational workforce really needs to be more nimble, more innovative, more creative, and more partnership focused than perhaps we have been in the first century. So these are some of the major components of our Centennial. Now, keep in mind what I'm talking about here is implementation of these, of our major goals. So under those 4 goals, there are 39 specific actions, and they've been tasked out to the field in a sort of non-quantitative way. We said, go pick one and do it, and then report on it and share it with others. Our National Park Foundation is designing a public marketing and branding campaign, which I'll go into in detail. We have a capital campaign. We have a very robust advisory board working on with citizen representation on helping us implement this. Then we have a series of special events and projects. We have a whole stakeholder and partner collaboration, and we have legislative action. So I'm going to go through these a little bit in detail. To a certain degree, collaboration is how we're going to execute the Centennial, and by doing so, we institutionalize collaboration as a behavioral trait of the organization. So you build that in as you implement the Centennial and ride this sort of successful wave, and then it becomes the way we do business. And so we have built this relationship amongst our own employees, our volunteers, our many partners, and there's a lot listed up there, and that's just a small smattering. And then our gateway communities, local tourism, and the visitors as well. So these are all integrated and a little bit of a giant thing to sort of manage, but it's incredibly important that we manage all of this collaboration. The employees themselves. So we have targeted our leadership to make sure that they are focused on the outcomes of this Centennial. We've built a whole internal communications network. I've done 32 what they call flat hat chats, where I basically talk to the staff, and I've done about a dozen or so other sort of communications directly to get both interaction back and forth with my field. Park Service is big. We have 22,000 employees spread across about 15 time zones, so it's a little bit difficult to reach them all at the same time, but we're working at it. I mentioned the 39 actions. There are now hundreds of very positive results from that, and we're putting them up on the web and sharing them with each other. Organizational flexibility, this is always a challenge when you're working within the federal structure, but this is a key to create this one in the next bullet, this partnership policy reform. We're looking to basically liberalize our whole policy partnership framework, and I have a team working on that specifically to create new policy around how we do partnerships. Strong focus on relevancy, diversity, and inclusion in the workforce itself. Frankly, the National Park Service workforce does not reflect the diversity of the American public, and that is a problem. And so we have a number of initiatives focused in this area. The Center for Innovation. I like to say that Washington, D.C. is the place where good ideas come to die. And so we needed some place in the organization other than Washington, D.C., where innovation could be fostered. It could be nurtured. And so we created the Center for Innovation at a great site at Marsh Billings Rockefeller National Historic Park in Woodstock, Vermont. And we gave them 2 tasks. Focus your innovation work in youth. What are the most effective programs for outreach and development with youth? And where are our most effective programs in our urban space? Because frankly, that is where today I think most of the innovation is occurring, is in the urban space. So, and those are the 2 categories right below there, where the Park Service has a very strong urban presence. We just have never really emphasized it. And we're putting a lot of focus on innovation and creativity in the urban space, and on with youth programs that actually work, that actually create a transformative experience for young people. I mentioned the advisory board. Steve and 8 other members came from the Second Century Commission, so it was not only a commission like yourselves that made recommendations. Now I've tasked them with implementation, and so they now serve on my advisory board and are taking a number of very specific actions in the field of education, in science, in economics, in relevancy, in urban, and there are subcommittees working on all of these across the board. Let me just give you for instance. The advisory board has a responsibility for recommending the designation of new National Historic Landmarks. And we recognized early on that the inventory of National Historic Landmarks and National Register properties are really exceptionally deficient in minorities and women. And so we have specifically tasked them to find and recommend, in working with the states, the designation of new National Historic Landmarks that recognize the contributions of women and minorities. So just last week, the Secretary designated the workshops of George Nakashima, one of the most revered woodworkers, and was interned at Minidoka, and also the murals in Detroit by Diego Rivera as new National Historic Landmarks, beginning to build relevancy into communities whose story has not necessarily been told. We've launched a series of initiatives specifically targeting minority populations that we started with American Latino. We brought 17 scholars together. They've identified the contributions of Latinos in American history, in the Civil War, in art, in culture, in music, in architecture down the line, and we were going to identify new sites specifically to the contributions of Latinos. We've launched the Asian American Pacific Islander theme study. We've launched the women's theme study, and in about 2 weeks we will launch the LGBTQ study to identify contributions as well from that community as well. So these will all roll up into potential new National Historic Landmarks, new National Register sites, and possibly even new national parks, such as we did with Cesar Chavez, Harriet Tubman, and Charles Young. We have set specific KPIs, key performance indicators, for our Centennial, and they are relevancy, connection, and support. And so basically, first you need to create relevancy. You need to connect to all Americans. You deepen that with connection, and that translates into support. And that support can be visitation, it can be advocacy, it can be constituency building, it can be volunteering, it can be philanthropy. All of those things are measurable results from the support. The National Park Foundation has hired Gray Advertising. They are a Madison Avenue marketing firm, E-Trade Baby. That's one of theirs. They do Super Bowl commercials. Top flight, world-renowned organization, and they are designing our public awareness campaign. We tasked them to focus on the adult millennial generation. That's basically 18 to 35, because frankly, if you look at them demographically, they are going to take over our institutions. They are going to have higher buying power. They're going to have more political influence. They're going to eclipse the boomers. Now, the boomers are our base. So the big challenge to Gray is to create a campaign that excites the millennials that doesn't upset our base. And they've said that's a big challenge. We need to connect to this generation in a way that we connected the parks community to the boomer generation. It's a challenge, but it's an opportunity. So the first year was research. And so Gray did about a year's worth of research. They did both qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative was through a blography, and then quantitative was specific tests. This is some of the findings. I can share all the findings with you if you're interested. But some interesting components here. Community efforts create personal connections. The memories and experiences strengthen the reasons to believe. And perceived proximity makes consumer donation feel like it's making a real difference. So there are components in here that we can activate in our 3 KPIs of relevancy, connection, and support through the qualitative research. And then in the quantitative, we actually tested a variety of concepts to move their perceptions about parks from one of these are pieces of land taken care of by the government to their direct involvement as well. And so we tested these and got actual solid quantitative results about increasing their likelihood of engagement and connections. And then we also tested a variety related specifically to philanthropic donations and how we could task and take on these specific projects to activate philanthropy as well. So built upon this body of research, we are now into the creative phase. And so there are some components to this in the Centennial Public Awareness Campaign. We launched a few weeks ago in Ad Week our 2 new marks, and you will notice that the Foundation and the Park Service now have very similar brand identity. We're not getting rid of the arrowhead, and I've said that about 500 times to my employees, but we've added a new mark, which is the silhouette arrowhead for the National Park Service, and then we created a very similar derivative for our foundation so that there is a mental association between the 2 brands, so that if you're activated by your experience with the National Park Service and you want to donate, the National Park Foundation has a brand association through this as well. One of the things that Gray told us was, you have a fantastic brand, you don't manage the brand. And so you're doing things for people all over the country that they have no idea that you're doing for them. And I would say the same is true of the California State Parks system. So brand awareness is one of our key components to this concept of Find Your Park. We'll be rolling out talent, as they call it in the marketing world, and we're currently in negotiations with who those might be out of the sports and Hollywood world. We're tapping particularly the social media world for this component called Share Your Story, which will be about the ability of both our employees to share their stories of working in the National Park System, as well as the visitors to share their stories within the social media frame as well. And then corporate sponsorship. We've done about 50 corporate meetings, listening tours, to talk to major American brands about co-branding, marketing for the Centennial, and we've gotten extraordinary support from all of them to participate in the Centennial as well. I want to point out that Find Your Park doesn't say Find Your National Park. It says Find Your Park. And so the opportunity as we roll this out in the first quarter of 15 in the major public awareness campaign will activate the millennials specifically, but the American people in general, to find their park, which probably will be, in many cases, a state park or a city park or a county park as well. And we're rolling that out in the first quarter of 15, and it'll run all of 15, 16, and 17. There are a number of major events that we're planning around this. You can kind of look down the list there, from national parades, traveling exhibits, special events, such as the BioBlitz we just did here in Golden Gate very recently. We're entering into an agreement with National Geographic to use many of their platforms. I mentioned the Share Your Story concept. Brand USA, the international marketing side of the Department of Commerce, is producing an IMAX film on the national parks, which will be released in 15, a major feature at the IPW, the Powwow International Travel and Tourism Conference as well. So multiple components for these events. They fall into sort of a range of categories, and everything from contests to arts, the digital media, new publications, promotional campaign, youth engagement, TV, film. We just launched this past 2 weeks ago was Disney's new nature film, Bears, entirely filmed at Katmai and Lake Clark, and the first week of proceeds went to the National Park Foundation to support the Centennial. We're in negotiations right now with Robert Redford's new A Walk in the Woods, which is on the Appalachian Trail, which will also roll out around the Centennial as well. The capital side of this, we think there's a significant opportunity specifically for our National Park Foundation to raise in the class of several hundred million. And then, of course, all of our friends groups out there, also places like the Golden Gate Conservancy and the Yosemite Fund and others to raise as well. And we're building this case for support. That lower right-hand picture, anybody know where that is? I guess where that is? That is the top of the Washington Monument. The very tip top of the Washington Monument, that's David Rubenstein on the right there. That's me in the green hat. And he gave us $7.5 million to repair the Washington Monument. There are philanthropists out there we know that will be willing to step up. We just need to ask. The Secretary of the Interior, Sally Jewell, as I mentioned, was on the Second Century Commission. She's totally devoted to this. She prepared an extraordinary fiscal 15 budgetary request. We were working on some new park designations. Again, as I mentioned, we did some already: Cesar Chavez, Colonel Young, Harriet Tubman, Fort Monroe, First State, and then new National Historic Landmark designations as well that are more representative of the country. Great opportunities to highlight all public lands. So when we say find your park, that could be finding your park within the BLM lands or within the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Refuge System as well. So we're looking at this very broadly. And then the Secretary has laid her priorities for youth around play, learn, serve, and work. And the National Park Service is the sort of the largest player in this field of really connecting all kids in the nation to their parks. The U.S. Congress, we are working to rebuild sort of champions at our congressional level. We used to have a lot of great champions on both sides of the aisle. For some reason or the other, that has waned, and so we've got a special initiative in sort of rebuilding that. We have Centennial legislation that we're packaging up, particularly around new authorities, particularly in the fee area and in the cooperative agreement area to sort of. And then I just got news yesterday that our Centennial commemorative coin passed the House 403 to 13, so it was certainly not a partisan split there, and that'll raise about $25 million for the National Park Service. It'll go to the Senate, and I already have all the signatures for the Senate bill in place. And then, of course, for appropriations, a lot of focus on rebuilding our workforce and taking on the backlog. We have great support at the White House, strong alignment with the First Lady Obama's Let's Move initiative, and a very strong alignment with our veterans returning and our wounded warriors, particularly in reconnecting them to family and to the country when they return from their overseas assignments. A number of special events around this, and then the whole health component here, the Healthy Parks, Healthy People piece, which is a fantastic opportunity to align with the health community to really begin to prescribe visits to national parks for their health benefits, and we're partnering around the country on that as well. We have a schedule laid out here, a little complicated. We're sort of, we're in 14 there, so we're sort of phasing out that first organizational phase. We're in the planning phase, and then the major implementation begins in 15, where we roll out the public awareness campaign, we roll out the major events, the capital marketing side, as well as the events across the system, and really begin to test our KPIs in terms of whether or not they've been successful. And so our outcome really is, to me, is that the Centennial is an opportunity to use the sort of bully pulpit of the National Park Service to reconnect all Americans with the multiple benefits that are provided by parks. And I use that term very broadly. It isn't just about the National Park System. We see we have a leadership role and responsibility here to utilize this Centennial event to rebuild this connection. And if we are successful in building that connection from a relevancy connection to support, that I think a lot of the issues that we are dealing with, both within the California State Park System and the National Park Service as well, will maybe not totally fixed, but we'll have a lot more tools in our toolbox to resolve them that can result in both visitation, diversity of visitation, diversity of representation, and what we are protecting and stewarding, constituency building, activation of volunteerism, and philanthropy. So with that, I do have one quick little video, and I show that first one, and then I'll take the questions. That one right there.
What is a park? Sure, it's a place that has trees and grass and furry creatures, but a park, a national park, is much more than that. It's more than just a physical space. It's the sense of pride that comes from a visit to the Statue of Liberty, or what you can learn at Thomas Edison's house. It is the gratitude that comes from natural disaster relief efforts, and the sense of community born of cultural resource outreach programs. These are all the things that a park can be: a place, a feeling, a state of mind, and they're all made possible by the hard work and dedication of the National Park Service. So get up, get out there, and find your park.
So that is not actually the real thing. That is just a mock-up, essentially stock video, but the concept that we will be using as a part of sort of the portal of our major campaign. So.
Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation. So much, so many good ideas that have been thought through and give us an opportunity to see the parallels between the great work you're doing and some of the great work that our state parks do as well. But I'm really impressed with the array of ideas you put on the table, John. Thank you. I would ask for comments or questions from the commissioners. Michael, how are you?
Good morning. Director Jarvis, fascinating presentation. You got my attention right at the very beginning of your remarks. You used a phrase, quote, symptoms of waning relevancy near the beginning in describing some of the conditions that the National Park Service is trying to address. I wanted to ask you, talking about two particular groups, young people and urban minorities, what is the National Park Service finding about how young people and urban minorities use national parks differently than the traditional base of national park visitors?
It's a great question. I think that what we're finding, I could talk about this for hours, and part of it is based on research, and part of it is based on the work that some of our great parks are actually doing to outreach and bring kids from urban environments to parks. A couple of things. One is that we know, regardless of their ethnicity or their socioeconomic background, that an experience, preferably a multiple experience, multiple hit, can be transformative, can actually completely redirect their lives from wherever they were headed, and perhaps headed into crime or gangs or whatever. It can completely change it. We've got a lot of examples of that. A one-shot generally doesn't do it, but multiple contacts, multiple opportunities can be transformative. The second component is, though, that the contrast of going to a place like Yosemite or Yellowstone and having that experience, and then going back to their own community and having nothing there, into a community that is park deficient, can really upset them, because then they see that contrast. And so I think what we're learning is that, and what we learned from some of our research, is that we need to be able to help them at the community level too. We need to activate our programmatic side, which we have a strong programmatic side, in a strategic way to assist them back in their own communities, to help parks be created through our State Side of Land and Water Conservation Fund, or UPAR, or our Rivers and Trails Conservation Assistance Program, or our Tax Act program, can help communities be revitalized so that there can be an experience within their own community as well. Now, a couple other things that are just, kind of what you would expect is, one is they're going to bring their technology. And so if you're thinking they're going to leave it home, get over it. Get over it now. You know, I've told the story 1,000 times. I'll probably another 1,000 times. Is when I get a room full of typical sort of park supporters, particularly the boomer age, they say, you know, make them leave that technology at home. And I say, oh, you're still hiking in wool then, huh? You're not wearing Gore-Tex. Yeah, you know, so you're picking on one technology and not another. And so I think we have to facilitate. I'm not saying that you should be able to get, you know, 4G when you're in the back country. But if you're at the visitor center, you better have it. And you're at the lodge, you better have it. You better have it, because don't look at it as a problem, look at it as an opportunity, because what they will do is they share that experience within a social network. And that leverages the information that you have at the park out into a much broader community. The other thing about young people is they want to do it together. They want to do it as a peer group. And often those peer groups are very diverse. I mean, and that's huge. And there's also a component, and this is also particularly with the millennials, is there's an element of discovery that they want to have about this. They do not like it spoon-fed. And we have this tradition, particularly in the park system, of sort of spoon-feeding you the information. We need to rethink how we're doing interpretation, how we present this information, and make it available to this next generation. I think the challenge is that there are a lot of kids out there that never have this opportunity. And I think that's what we, as a coalition around parks, around youth programs, around boys and girls clubs, all of that need to work together to give every kid in the nation that opportunity to be in one of these spaces.
Thank you.
Yeah, John. First of all, thank you for this wonderful presentation. And my question really has to do around the workforce. And two things. First of all, you've mentioned about the idea of engagement really requires a different philosophy and approach on the part of the workforce. So my first comment is to congratulate you because I personally believe under your leadership within the National Park Service, that transition is continuing to happen and is accelerating towards a model where the staff, the rangers, and other park partners, everybody is starting to engage the public in a different way, like you were mentioning, understanding millennials and understanding different ethnic groups. The question is, as we look at this from the state park perspective, trying to accomplish the same goals, how much emphasis or importance is this for us to get this right in terms of how our workforce and the workforce culture changes and transforms?
Unless you bring the workforce along and they buy in, this will ultimately fail. I mean, to be very blunt about it, the folks that are on the ground doing the day-to-day work, they're the key to this, because they're the ones that take care of the resource and talk to the public on a day-to-day basis. And I having worked many years in partnership with California State Park employees, and my own employees, these are mission-driven, great stewards. They are somewhat demoralized, even my own organization, with sort of the way government employees are thought of this day and age, thrown under the bus with everybody else, and they're under-resourced, overworked, and disappointed, I would say, with their ability to achieve the mission. The mission, which is very much of a core value of park employees, is to provide these places, unimpaired, for the enjoyment of the public, and to preserve them for future generations. That's sort of, it's in our blood. And what they're looking for, in my view, is leadership, priority setting, involvement in the decision-making process, and support. And I think active engagement with the employees is going to be critical. it also is critical to institutionalizing the change you're looking for. Now, I do believe that the future of park management is going to be all about collaboration and partnerships. This concept of we manage it and you cooperate is kind of the old century. The new century, the second century of park stewardship is about collaboration. It's about shared power. It's about innovation and creativity and figuring out a way that that can rise up and be shared. And we have great models of it around both the National Park System, and I'm sure there's some in the California State Park System as well. But I think appealing to the employees' core values around mission and stewardship and getting them on board and accessing their ideas. You know, as you know, Margaret Weekly, who served on our Second Century Commission, said that organizational change can be developed when leadership identifies within your own organization where the future already exists. You just need to nurture it, you need to illuminate it, and you need to create communities of practice around that. And what happens then is the employees begin to follow that. They will follow those pioneers when leadership identifies that within its own organization. Very difficult to impose anything down from the top, because we are, you know, like my organization is geographically distributed and very independent, and I would suggest that's probably true of California State Parks too.
John, as you know, national parks and state parks are situated over lands and waters that are ancestrally very important and culturally relevant today to many, many tribal nations throughout the U.S. And yet there is a long history of resistance to having tribal peoples involved in the stewardship and management and actively taking care of these lands in partnership with the agencies that are charged with doing so. And so I'm wondering if you can share with us some examples of how National Park Service is working with tribes on collaborative partnerships that can be inspirational to us as we look to not only working with tribes, but across many sectors in California to do the same.
That's a great comment and great question. So, you know, it's interesting, the national park idea, which, you know, we claim in the United States as having created this concept and applied it, at least initially in the West, were applied to lands that we had removed the native people from. These were occupied lands, and through war, disease, discrimination, racism, all of those things, these lands were essentially unoccupied when the park concept was laid upon them. And interestingly, the national park idea, we claim, and it went international, went around the world, and when it got back it was different. As it was applied around the world, there was a recognition that indigenous peoples had this long relationship with the land and had been stewards of it for, you know, thousands, if not tens of thousands of years, and that for the park model to be successful in Africa or South America or others, that indigenous peoples' rights and responsibilities and authorities needed to be recognized. And so we're now learning from that in the U.S. National Park System. The place we did it the best, of course, was Alaska, where it was built into the legislation that established the Anilka Parks and recognized that traditional activities like subsistence, all the traditional practices and land ownership and stewardship were retained in the legislation. In the lower 48, there's been less of a recognition legislatively, but from a policy standpoint, we have been working with tribes. And, you know, I think one of the most fantastic things that we're working on right now is the establishment of the very first tribal national park in the South Unit of Badlands, and with the Ogallala Sioux Nation, which has been one of the projects I've been working on for a long time. But also in active recognition that probably the best partner that the parks community can have in thinking about and stewarding lands for the next generation are tribal people. And so we have been, whether it's Canyon de Chelly or Mesa Verde or Mount Rainier or Redwoods with the Yurok, we have been working to rebuild those relationships and invite not only them to come back, but to participate actively in the stewardship of these places. And so I think that's also part of this sort of building relevancy, and particularly, frankly, with the young people on the reservations that have lost a lot of the connection and rebuilding. So we have youth corps that are coming out of specific reservations to do work with us on their traditional lands.
Yes, I know we're running a little short on time, but something that we hold in common is the whole matter of how to deal with the business partnerships that the government parks have. And I wonder if you can comment on what goals you've set to improve the effectiveness of the, concessionaire and outside vendor, kind of the public-private operating relationships. What are your goals, and how's it going, and what advice do you have for us?
Well, one thing that we learned probably a decade or so ago is we're not very good at this, and so you can have a great ranger that's maybe got a background in biology or something, but the business mind is not there. Sorry, so we started about a decade ago recruiting specifically at the top business schools in the country, and brought in. I lost count at some point, but we probably have 75 or more permanent employees that we brought out of Wharton and Stanford and others that are now inside our organization running the sort of business side of the house. And they bring fantastic skills and capability to the organization about how you manage the business side, the non-appropriated side. So we have, our fee program, which is funds that we retain, we collect about $250 million a year in fees, and then we have our whole concessions side of the house, which is complicated, but in many cases these MBAs are doing a fantastic job of sort of cleaning up our way we think about the business side of the organization. Our concessions gross about $1 billion in lodging and tourism. And so, for instance, one of the projects we took on on the business side of the house is really utilizing the experience within the concession as part of the overarching experience, and that's our Healthy Food Initiative, where if you're coming to a national park and it's a healthy experience, then you ought to have healthy food as a part of that. And so using our business side of the house to convince the concessioners that this is a good business opportunity for them, as well, and helping us actually craft our prospectus and business models. I think there's still work to be done in that area, though, and we don't have it all solved.
Follow up on that. So how do you get 75 MBAs how do you recruit and how do you retain 75 MBAs, assuming that your salaries are not competitive with what they would be earning outside? So what's your secret?
We have a secret. It's called national parks. So you go to Stanford and you put out a competitive announcement, working with the schools to spend a summer in Yosemite National Park, working at the senior leadership team to develop a business plan for the park. And these extraordinary young folks come over. They were intended to go, work at Wall Street and make a lot of money, and they suddenly fall in love with the lifestyle, the work, the camaraderie, the community, and they, just like those young folks, their trajectory changes. Not all of them, but a lot of them, and it's very seductive. They decide to come join us.
Any other comments, members? I know Lance has one. And those
Could I have one when there's an opportunity?
There's John Reynolds.
John, I'm sorry, out of sight, out of mind. John Reynolds. Hi.
Hi, John. Thank you for a great presentation. It's really, really nicely done. You and I believe, I think that the National Park Service and the California State Parks have both found that the traditional recruitment methods that we have historically used only end up solidifying a continuation of the past. I know you're working on addressing that. Could you give us any advice on how to accelerate the California State Parks opportunities to change the demographics of its workforce? Thank you.
Yeah, we're struggling as well with essentially a lack of diversity in the organization. The Park Service is very career-driven, sort of come in at the bottom and work your way up, and that, frankly, results in a not very diverse organization. I mean, because not everybody is willing to do that. They may not be in a financial situation to be able to make those kind of commitments and work for multiple years as a seasonal and then slowly get in, and then they may not be geographically mobile. I mean, a variety of reasons, and so we have to sort of break that paradigm apart. I would say that the other thing is that we have all these great programs, extraordinary programs that connect with youth, and like Nature Bridge and our SCA and California Conservation Corps and a variety of these. We don't look at those as sort of building your farm team for the organization. We don't link up the experiences. We lose contact. You get them out there into the park. They have these fantastic experiences. The spark goes on. They suddenly see this could be a path, and then we lose contact with them. We don't make a second or third contact. And so one of the things that we're doing in our human resources, workforce, relevancy, and diversity program is creating a path for a clear path for these young folks to make from initial contact, a second contact, a third contact. Probably the most successful program in the National Park Service is at the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area, which is a big partnership park for us, where they're literally tracking these kids from essentially about age 12 right through college. They're mentoring them. They're giving them logistical support, picking them up at their house, giving them a variety of opportunities, and they're transitioning these kids into careers with the National Park Service.
Director Jarvis, let me also echo my thanks for your presentation today. It's great to have you here. Very informative. I was listening to your answer to Commissioner Wu's question about the MBAs, and I couldn't help but hope that we can soon provide some competition for you to recruit those graduates. The question I have is just wondering if you could describe a little bit, again, given the time constraints we're under, some of the transformation that's occurred within the service relating to law enforcement and what's happened over the last decade or so.
Okay, sure. I started my career in law enforcement in the Park Service. Spent 12 years as a commissioned ranger. Went through FLETC and served as a law enforcement ranger. But I also, at that moment in time, the Park Service was going through a transition to convert our law enforcement officers to what's called 6C, which is 20-year retirement enhanced annuity. And a number of us at that point chose to surrender our commissions because once you're in that sort of track, there's a mandatory retirement age, and so a significant chunk of the Park Service moved into 6C, and then as new employees came in, they were in this sort of law enforcement track. Now, our rangers in the National Park Service do many things. They don't just do law enforcement. In most cases, some of our real intense law enforcement parks, their predominant job is law enforcement, but it is also multidisciplinary responsibilities. They do wildland and structural fire and EMS, interpretation in some cases and others. But over time, what has happened organizationally is because we're now, this sort of cohort of law enforcement rangers are eligible to retire after 20 years, many of them are. retiring and then pursuing a second career in a different field and continuing on in law enforcement. We've also focused on professionalizing our law enforcement organization. In not all of our parks, or a lot of parks are sleepy backwaters and nothing ever happens. But there are some parks that are pretty intense. Lake Mead, for instance, a very intense law enforcement park with Las Vegas right there. And there are other parkways and other things where we really have to have pretty intensive and highly skilled law enforcement. We have built a very professional law enforcement organization within the service that can respond to major emergencies, be the first on the scene. We have a whole nationwide dispatch program. And then I also have a sort of urban elite law enforcement force, my U.S. Park Police, that are based in New York, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C., about 700 officers. And they're part of the Washington, D.C. sort of security infrastructure around the monuments, memorials, as well as the White House. So we have a big law enforcement organization. What has happened in terms of transition to leadership, our superintendent positions and our leadership positions are open competitions. There is no one gets preference for those jobs, and so it's an open competition. And what has happened over time is fewer and fewer of our law enforcement organization either apply for, and very few actually even apply for these senior positions anymore, or are even interested in them, I'm not drawing that a complete blanket because there are some that do want to come up into the organization. But if you rise up into these positions, you have to surrender your commission because the job is no longer a law enforcement job. So there is a career track, up to through our criminal investigator side of the house and up to our chief rangers and then our law enforcement specialists in Washington that can get up to all the way up to senior executive service within a commission side of the house. But generally what's happened within the superintendent ranks and for the national parks is they're now more and more coming out of natural resources, archaeology, history, cultural interpretation, planning, architecture, landscape architecture, design. That's sort of the crowd that is now occupying most of our senior superintendent positions in the service.
Director Jarvis, thank you so much for a very informative and stimulating presentation. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. To members of the audience, we'd like to take some public comment now. For those of you who have turned in a card, they're being delivered up here right now. Anyone else who wants to speak, if you'll fill out a card, name, and in the back corner there. All right. Thank you all for filling out the cards. I see Senator Noreen Evans has a staff person here.
Yes.
I thought I recognized you. All right. Tom, you want to kick things off, and then we'll go to Susan Stompy, if I'm saying that right, Patricia Johns, etc.
Chairman Keel, we have a timer set at 3 minutes. Do you want to use that as a guideline?
Do you need more time?
I would ask your indulgence
to
have a little bit more time.
A little bit more time is fine, and to all the members of the audience, if you can be as non-repetitive as possible, that's very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for holding this hearing. It's good to see John Jarvis again. I've worked with him in my former life when I worked for Congress. I have to say that in our district, the second district, which encompasses the coast from the Golden Gate up to Oregon border, the most exciting thing that has happened recently, and I'm hearing it everywhere, is the designation of the new national monument up at Point Arena. And I want to thank the National Park Service for the work on that.
Very good.
So I have some comments from Senator Evans, and it's addressed to co-chairs Khan and Kehoe and the members here. So I'm going to be reading from this. My Senate district is home to 58 state parks, of which 20 were on the 2012 closure list. The health of our state parks is of extreme importance to my constituents, whose communities depend on these parks for recreation and renewal, and are a cornerstone of their local economies. I also have a huge personal interest in our state parks, having spent my entire life camping and hiking throughout the state. Growing up in a family with limited economic resources, we made good use of state parks for annual summer vacations. I understand their vital importance to both our society and our environment. Saying that parks belong to the people of California is not a throwaway phrase, but by strong and fervent belief. I recognize the importance of the Parks Forward Commission in revitalizing our state park system after a long period of fiscal instability, neglect, and the terrible scandals that followed. I salute commissioners for their long hours as they have contributed to this great goal of ensuring the mission of the park system far into the future. I would like to comment on the working draft of the Commission's report released last week, which signals some new directions for state parks, some which are encouraging and overdue, and some, if not corrected, could lead to a park system that may actually erode citizen ownership of our state parks. One is the peace officer certification. First, I'd like to applaud the report's recommendations to improve training and advancement opportunities to state park personnel. And no one should be barred from advancement because of lack of peace officer certification. Training should be focused on creating highly skilled, service-oriented, cooperative staff to meet the challenges of a new park system. Ultimately, the quality of park staff determines visitors' park experience and becomes a huge factor in public support. Partnerships. The draft report recommends the Department of Parks and Recreation, DPR, increase facilitation and collaboration with a variety of partners, including nonprofits, public agencies, and for-profit companies. I'm proud that my district has been a leader in nonprofit and public agency collaboration, resulting in parks that are not only for business, but are laboratories of innovation. Getting operation agreements with DPR were not easy for these groups, and over the last year and a half, there have been mistakes and miscommunications made by both DPR and its partners. However, I cannot agree with the report's recommendation that, quote, the department should work with the California legislature to lower barriers to partnerships, unless it is conditioned by the following: so long as partnerships do not lower resource protection standards and do not result in commercialization. Such partnerships must ensure a fair return to the state. Furthermore, such partnerships require clear, strong, and transparent oversight to ensure operations are in the public interest and to prevent misuse of public resources for private interests. I cannot support continued privatization of state parks. In 2012, prior to the appointment of Director Jackson, 21 proposals for privatization of state parks were issued by DPR, with 4 contracts signed with for-profit companies. The RFPs originally required only 3% of gross receipts, going back to the Park Service, or in the case of one park, as little as $400 in annual payments to run the parks. The performance bond for one of the parks contracted was only $6,000 per annum. Does that amount equal the potential loss of use of that park per year? One of the for-profit companies was an Arizona corporation, resulting in shifting employees and revenues out of state. Director Jackson has tightened up concession contracting, but if the department is encouraged to lower barriers for for-profit partnerships, just how low can we go before both the state and public interests suffer? 3 is support entity. The creation of a nonprofit support entity is an intriguing idea, though I remain skeptical. Certainly our national parks have benefited by the support of such organizations as the National Parks Foundation, the Golden Gate Parks Association, and the National wildlife refugee system with the ongoing support of the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. These support entities help create programs, assist in acquisitions, and advocate for issues and programs. However, it is unclear from the description of the support entity recommended in the report where the line is drawn between the mandated responsibilities of the department and the support entity. The report recommends that the support entity take key roles in strategic planning and coordination, fundraising and financing, communication and marketing, land acquisition, organizational capacity and effectiveness, and may receive a direct appropriation from the legislature. Combining all these duties and responsibilities in the support entity appear to considerably exceed the powers of similar organizations previously mentioned. Further, many responsibilities duplicate those of DPR and may have the effect of merely privatizing the current functions of the department. How are conflicts between the department and the support entity resolved? Do they diminish the authority of the department? In the ambitious revenue generation programs pushed by the support entity, how can we make sure that the department is able to hold the line on commercialization and resource protection? How can we ensure that the support entity represents the public, is transparent, and has sufficient oversight? These are important questions that go to the heart of the mission of state parks and require specific answers to inform the legislature and the public. Improving access. I applaud the draft's report emphasis on expanding access to our parks to increase visitation, especially by urban residents and underserved communities. Certainly, transportation programs, services, and facilities need to be improved and added to attract people to our parks and have parks ingrained as an important part of our daily lives. Yet, in many communities throughout the state, quote, bust them and build it and they will come, unquote, is not relevant. The fact is that many people simply cannot afford frequent visits to our parks under its current fee and pass structure. Those who live in Southern California, urban and beach areas are especially hard hit, where parking may cost $15 a day. A $50 pass gets you into historical parks only. A $70 pass gives access to most, but not all, North Coast parks and some Central Valley parks. There is no pass that is good at all state parks, though the premium pass is priced at $195. Studies show that as fees go up, visitation goes down. In Northern California, where we have a long tradition of free state beaches and little other coastal access, new fees will have the effect of lowering visitation and encouraging people to trespass in their own state parks, requiring more policing of widely separated parks. Increased emphasis on revenue generation will make the park experience more expensive and have the effect of reducing access to the very populations that we most need to serve. The report's authors admit that even with increased revenue generation, state parks need a stable and consistent funding source to keep ahead. Some of that funding could come from the oil extraction tax legislation I have authored. Absent that, parks need dedicated funding from the state's taxpayers who deserve in return universal access, decent maintenance, and a consistent level of services. 5, and this is not contained in the report, but here is a suggestion. I suggest that we begin to acknowledge the wide diversity within our park system. Visiting Sutter's Fort in Sacramento is certainly a different experience than hiking through Castle Craig. Some parks are better situated to produce revenues than others. Some parks may be better suited to accommodate special events than others. When it comes to our state parks, one size does not fit all. I believe that if we want to improve our parks, some possible classifications could include urban recreation, free access, heavy program and sports emphasis, fewer restrictions on recreational structures. Dog walking would be permitted in some areas. Community activities and programs would be encouraged. Some parks may be adjacent to regional parks and operated in partnerships with local public agencies. Community park, free or low-cost access to encourage casual use. These parks are located in rural or semi-rural communities where there are few park alternatives and few services are provided. Many rural state beaches would fall into this category. Dog walking permitted in some areas, community events and programs, if allowed, would be restricted to certain areas of the park. Repetitive recreation. These are parks or beaches that provide recreations mainly for local residents. While open to everyone, these parks would serve surfers or other sports enthusiasts who would be able to buy at a reasonable price passes that could be used at only one or two of these types of parks. As in a community park, community events and programs, if allowed, may be restricted to some areas of the park. State Historical Park. High level of resource protection and programming. Could be used for special events, and obviously there's a high revenue producing potential. And then the high resource value. These are parks with unique resources such as old growth redwoods and sequoias, rare desert ecosystems, or endangered plants and animals. Entrance fees must remain reasonable. Private events would rarely be allowed. Because most of these parks are far from urban areas, they may be suitable for revenue-producing projects such as transportation, food sales, and overnight accommodation. Again, I thank the esteemed co-chairs and the Commission for their diligence and thoughtfulness in dealing with these very difficult issues. You have a lot of work ahead of you. However, if we do it right, we will have improved, preserved, and protected the greatest park system in the world. Please let me know how I can help. Sincerely, Karen Evans, Senator, 2nd District. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Rolfe, is there a possible that you can send that to us so we'll have the document?
I have copies here.
Great. So we would certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, there's a lot to chew on
there. There is. There's a lot to chew on, and please extend our thanks to Senator Evans for giving the report, so much thought and having specific responses. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you. And she's very serious about working with you, whatever we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to, good morning, come on up to the other speakers. And Susan Stompy is next, followed by Patricia Johns.
Thank you. I'm Susan Stomp with the Marine Conservation League.
And if, Ms. Stompy,
yes.
Before we go on, if we can go back to a little bit closer to 3 minutes because there's a
Sure.
number of speakers to accommodate.
Absolutely. Thank you. We appreciate all the work you've been doing and the studies that have been produced for your information and for the public information have been very helpful in being able to understand what all is going on and what all needs to be addressed. We were concerned, however, that in some of the funding reports that a base level, it was kind of an average of what has been the expenditures for state parks in the last few years. And we are concerned that using this as kind of a base is going to be detrimental in the long run, because we feel that a lot of the parks have not been adequately staffed. And if you go from an inadequate base and work from there, it's going to be it's going to produce an inadequate result. So we do have a concern about that. We are concerned about depending upon the corporate involvement to help finance our public facilities, because our concern rests with the profit motive trumping the public good, and not being able to keep that the public as the forefront for those operations. And as Senator Evans pointed out, privatization is of concern to a lot of us, excuse me, who've been working with the parks. We also question the support entity that is in this latest document, and not describing how it would work and function with other existing entities, such as the State Park Foundation, which has been a tremendous asset during these difficult times in training volunteers and having their the park efforts in helping keeping our parks going. And we were delighted to hear, or I'm delighted to hear, that there will be additional public workshops in the coming months to give the public an opportunity to address the final or the more final version of the document before it is sealed. And we do appreciate that, and we'll continue to participate. And thank you very much for all your work.
Next, thank you, Ms. Stompy. Next is Patricia Johns, followed by Tracy Ferraro Torres.
Hi, I believe you mean Patricia Jones. Just make sure I got that's who you want.
Well, I don't want to comment on your penmanship, but it's Jones.
All right. Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, and a shout out to the Commissioner out in Wahoo Land. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Patricia Jones, represent. Okay. Hi, I'm Patricia Jones, representing the Sierra Club and Citizens for East Shore Parks, which is the organization instrumental in creating McLaughlin East Shore State Park, a truly urban park here in the Bay Area. We've been following this process with great interest, and thank you for your efforts. I will make brief comments today, and then later the Sierra Club and CES will follow up with more detailed written comments. We do see several things to support in this report, such as promoting non-peace officers being able to be promoted, working more effectively with qualified nonprofit and other park agency partners. However, like Senator Evans, we do not support privatizing state parks. We support the idea of expanding access to more diverse and urban population. A few areas we could see that could be strengthened. First, the environmental community would have really liked to have seen that protecting natural resources as your #1 recommendation. Second, we could see stronger language to establish standards and best practices for management of natural lands. And third, while we support having recreational activities to attract youth and diverse populations to the park, we urge that you not expand recreational opportunities at the expense of preserving and introducing this youth to natural resources within the parks. We'd also like to see you offer much more specific ideas and analysis of the crucial dedicated funding that is needed. When I applied to be on the State Parks Commission, I was asked a number of questions from the governor's office about what I would do to increase funding. So we would like to see funding ideas and associated pros and cons and cost benefit and revenue stream analysis provided. And we will, as far as the suggestion of this new support organization, we will address that at a later time. So thank you very much. We look forward to the next steps.
Thank you very much for your comments. And Tracy Verrado Torres will be followed by Lynn Paulson, followed by Bob Berman. Morning, Tracy. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Kehoe, Commissioner Khan, and all commissioners. Tracy Verrado Torres with the California State Parks Foundation, and I appreciate the chance to give some early comments. I think, like Patricia and others, we will probably be putting some comments in writing, but having had about a week or so, a little less than a week to read this, and we have 130 advocates coming to Sacramento next week to lobby the legislature on behalf of state parks. We're a little busy in our shop, so we'll get you some more comments. I first want to appreciate and extend our appreciation to the Commission for reflecting some of the values and even specifically the Park Excellence Report that we at the Foundation worked on previously. Just one note, just from a chronology perspective, we actually released the report in February 2011. I know your report sort of places us in the summer of 2012, and we can certainly talk with staff about that. But I raise it only because in releasing it in partnership with Save the Redwoods League in February 2011, it really was the product of work done in 2009 and 2010. And so I just want to reflect what you all know, which is on the partner side, we all have been at this issue of trying to, in partnership with the department, but sometimes even independently, put suggestions for change on the table for quite some time. And we welcome the work of this commission in really lifting the boat of what we put with Save the Redwoods League in that report. I do want to say, and I appreciate Susan and the Marin Conservation League's comments to us. We at the Foundation, we are supportive, we can be supportive of the creation of a new or perhaps multiple new support entities that will fill the gaps in what is not currently being provided in terms of support and resolution for the problems facing our state park system. And I say that because I think there are some places where there are existing organizations, certainly ours at the State Parks Foundation, that are doing some of the things envisioned in the report for the support entity. And we would certainly want to have more dialogue with the Commission about that. I also want to reflect, in the room here today, you actually have a microcosm of organizations that are addressing part of the issue that Director Jarvis referenced in terms of waning relevance. You have Bonnie Hawley from Friends of Santa Cruz, you have Mark Fall from the Save Saddleback community, you have Bob Berman from Benicia, Chiska Van Wyck from the Valley of the Moon Natural History Association. You have a variety of partners in the room today who have been doing what Tip O'Neill said, making politics, or I would say parks, local. And so the issue about how you make parks relevant is partly an issue about change at the department, but it is also an issue about recognizing the value of organizations that have sometimes independently, but often in close partnership with the department, made local programming a priority, made local identification of their market and their market share a priority. And there is great expertise out there in the community of park partners now that a new entity may be able to build on, or we may be able to augment what's already out there right now. Clearly, implementation is a key to this report, and that part of the chapter is not written. We look forward to working with the Commission on that and many other aspects of this report. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next is Lynn Paulson, followed by Bob Berman, followed by Richard Rothman. Welcome.
My name is Lynn Paulson from Washoe Meadows Community. We commend you for the beginnings of a plan to protect our state parks and make them more accessible and sustainable. Protecting natural, cultural, and recreational resources is the core of State Parks' mission and has been our focus due to the ongoing threats at Washoe Meadows State Park near South Lake Tahoe. It's important that you have referenced this core mission throughout the draft report and that you've outlined several key actions needed to protect park resources. We do, however, find some gaps in the recommendations that need to be filled in order to improve the protections to park resources and also regain the public trust. First, for protection of state park resources, your attention should also be focused on the role that the State Park and Recreation Commission should play in defining policies that provide better protection of these cherished resources. In addition, an absence of general plans for many park units can contribute to weakness in the protection of park resources. Your report should assist with any recommendations on streamlining this process and catching up on the backlog, possibly with the help of the new support entity you recommended. Second, the report mentions developing tools for better communication with a broader, more diverse constituency of park users and supporters, and the need for financial accountability and transparency. However, there's not enough emphasis on making the recommended changes, decisions, and metrics visible to the public. There's also a need for more openness on many aspects of park management, including status and prioritization of general plans and their implementation. Third, while your report envisions an expansion of the type of partnerships, we have observed issues with contractor management for maintenance projects as well as failures in the management of concession contracts. It is worrisome, to say the least, to think that state parks will take on more partnership or outsourcing when they haven't proved capable of effective management of the current scope of contracts. We do understand that you won't be evaluating details on every individual park unit, but the issues at Washoe Meadows State Park have statewide implications due to the precedent-setting downgrade and threats to park resources, among other issues. That's why we think it's imperative that you consider the Washoe Meadows situation in the broader context of the recommendations you will make to improve the processes and sustainability of state parks. Thank you, and I'd like to provide written comments to the Commission.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Berman, followed by Mr. Rothman, and then Supervisor Norma Santiago is here, so we welcome her. She'll be after the next two.
Thank you very much. I'm Bob Berman with the Benicia State Parks Association. We assist the state parks with the Benicia State Capitol Historic Park and the Benicia State Recreation Area. Two brief comments that I wanted to make this morning. First of all, I do really appreciate the work that's gone into this report, and I think it does provide a good foundation. I am concerned about one of the areas facilitate and support effective partnerships. I think we need some more work here. And the Benicia State Park Association is a cooperating association working with state parks. And what we have found is we end up with a lot of responsibility to do things, but we don't have much authority. And I think we need to look at, in terms of the partnerships, and Tracy mentioned some of the other partners that are here today, that we need to find a way to streamline the process for the types of projects, the types of programs that we want to implement. We've been working, it took us over a year to implement a small irrigation project in the back of the Fisher Hamlin House, about a $10,000 project, and we spent more than a year trying to implement that. I'm not suggesting that we bypass rules and regulations, but we do need to find a way to streamline the process to allow those cooperating associations to implement projects that are consistent with the general plan or the overall plans for those parks. So that's one area. The other area that I had specific concerns about is the discussion of the creation of the new organization. And you've heard some comments today. I won't go into any additional comments, although I would say I generally completely support the ideas and the concerns that I heard from Senator Evans' staff regarding the new organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And we'll go to Richard Rothman and then to Supervisor Santiago.
Hi, my name is Richard Rothman, and thank you for having the meeting today in the Bay Area. I've been going to Asilomar for over 30 years, and I'm glad you're talking about diversity, because when I go there, I don't see the representation of California at Asilomar, and I think this needs something to be done. And also, I'm a volunteer at Point Bonita Lighthouse, which is part of the Golden Gate National Recreational Area. And one thing they have in the Marin Headlands that I think you could adopt in Asilomar is the Bridge to Wellness and the YMCA. And these are programs that bring students, usually for 2 or 3 days, to the Marin Headlands, and they come to the lighthouse and they go and they explore the national parks. And at Asilomar, they have buildings there that can accommodate groups of kids there. And when it's not filled with convention people, I cannot see why the state and Asilomar can't work with these groups like Bridge to Wellness and the YMCA and bring kids down from the inner cities, San Jose, San Francisco. I have seen some groups there. I haven't inquired where they're from, but I think this would be good, because one thing bothers me about Asilomar, I don't think it's a state park, and it's supposed to be representative of all the people, but the way they have the pricing structure, I don't think it's affordable to all the people. And I think we need to look at the structure and how the state funds it, and if the state can help subsidize, so Asilomar is accessible to all the people of California. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Supervisor Norma Santiago from El Dorado County, welcome.
For the record, my name is Norma Santiago, El Dorado County Supervisor. I represent District 5, which encompasses the Lake Tahoe area. And El Dorado County, El Dorado means the golden one. So guess what we have? We have Marshall Gold State Park there as well. So the state parks are a great treasure for us in El Dorado County. I want to commend the Commission for recognizing that if we are to inspire innovation, creativity, and economic sustainability in our state parks, there needs to be a change both internally and externally. I was taken a lot by some of the comments made by Director Jarvis, and so I just want to talk about some of the things that I think we need to elaborate in the report that was presented earlier this week, or late last week. the things about communications internally with regards to at the executive management level to the field, to middle management, to the field staff. There is a huge disconnect in terms of understanding the vision and what the direction is that we're going. And I'll give you a perfect example. I was spending some time at the Coloma Park, the Golden, at Marshall Gold State Park, where we were talking about marketing, and there's a new marketing department now at state parks. We have a marketing effort. However, the feeling was that that marketing effort wasn't going to touch this particular park. So I think that part of the strategy is that we figure out how we get those resources down to the regional level so that we can do some shameless self-promotion on a particular regional park area that benefits the entire park system. And I think that that kind of connection between the upper management and the field staff is an important thing to do, because as you're talking about workforce development, they need to feel that they're engaged, that they are part of the process, as Director Jackson said. And quite frankly, my feeling and my experience is that there is a huge disconnect. I also wanted to give you an example on workforce development that the U.S. Forest Service is utilizing in South Lake Tahoe called Generation Green, where they go to youth of diverse backgrounds and actually engage them starting in middle school and on to high school about biology, about forest management, and they actually have a project that they present. It is a successful project because these young people eventually end up in working in U.S. Forest Service activities. The other thing that I cannot emphasize enough, and I'm sorry, my time is up.
Please continue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bringing the voice of your constituents here, so thanks.
Thank you very much. The need for comprehensive business plans that show an implementation of general plans. And you heard Ms. Paulson talk earlier about how there is a lack of general plans in many of these parks that we have, or that the general plans have been sitting on a shelf and haven't been implemented or haven't been updated. And again, that should be reflective of the overall mission of the park system, but at the same time, there needs to be a way to implement those general plans in a way that leads to long-term sustainability, environmentally, economically, and socially. Finally, you heard a lot of comments, I'm not going to repeat, about the importance of partnerships. There is no doubt from an economic development standpoint that when we are, for instance, in South Lake Tahoe, surrounded by these great state parks, because quite frankly we have the best. We have Bliss, we have Emerald Bay, we have Washoe Meadows, that generates an economic development opportunity for the local jurisdiction as well. So we have resources. El Dorado County has resources. We have individuals that are enthusiastic to help work with the state parks to help us implement our own parks and recreation master plans. That's where the partnership can happen. And I would ask that this commission consider building those partnerships with the local jurisdictions so that we can find activities that we can partner at to mutual benefit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very good points. We appreciate your comments. Next we have Jose Gonzalez, followed by Charles Harris, followed by Peter Dumont. Welcome, Mr. Gonzalez.
Hi, thank you everybody. I really appreciate the work that you do. I'm Jose Gonzalez, the founder of Latino Outdoors. It's a nonprofit project in which we're trying to very quickly, some of the things with the report is I really want to build on what Director Jarvis mentioned, this idea of the story, the power of story. And when we go to these places, what are the stories that these parks tell us and how we feel connected to the stories? I'll give you a very specific example. We just took a group of families in the Central Park to one of the few state parks in the Central Valley, which is Caswell Memorial State Park. And it's that question of when we have these families here that live only 15 minutes away, and it's some of their first experience in these parks, even though they know they can go to Yosemite, or they know they can go to the San Luis National Wildlife Refuge, or they go to the city parks. But it was a good opportunity to see, talking about the story of community, but also the story of parks, and how state parks needs to kind of keep its identity, but at the same time, it's part of this bigger community of what is a park. And when we had a little 3-year-old be able to arrive there and say, so where's the park? Because their experience has been a city park, cut lawn, grass green, and it was an opportunity for his dad to be able to say, this is a park. This is a different type of park. This is a state park. And then the experience just rolled on from there. So I want to bring that because I think in how the report definitely, we talk about diversity and inclusion and more community engagement, is what will that look like on the ground? And as we look at what is this network of state parks, on Twitter I'm using the hashtag Parques para Todo, Parques para Todos. It's kind of the idea there's parks for everything, but parks for everyone. And how when we say park, so what does that look like in terms of the community of what is a state park, and how's that working with national parks, with city parks? Because then that's where I'm seeing the community be able to step up and support you, and that they want to be able to say, we support state parks because we support all parks, and we will not support state parks because we have been taxed for this park and then we don't see the benefits in our city parks. I think that's an important marketing, information, community engagement distinction that should be in there as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Charles Harris, followed by Peter Dumont. Welcome.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for this process. I think it's an excellent process, well overdue, long overdue, and delighted to see it. My name is Charles Harris. I'm a director of the Naturist Action Committee and the Naturist Education Foundation. We've attended a number of these meetings, so I won't go into who we are. I think probably everybody remembers or would like to know. I can explain that later. But I'm representing a user group that for many, many years was officially recognized as a user group of California state parks under the Cahill policy, which was promulgated by former director Russell Cahill back in the late 70s. About 5 or 6 years ago, that policy was summarily revoked by the State Parks Department without explanation, without the chance for public hearing, without any consideration, and we were ejected from the state park system. I was reading the Parks Commission draft report last night and this morning, and I'd just like to cite a few things from that very quickly. First, the department must fundamentally transform its operations and management to facilitate and enable effective collaborations. Second, all Californians should have access to a network of parks. Parks should promote a healthy lifestyle. An effective department is one that seeks and embraces new models and opportunities for working with the existing and new partners to advance the vision in new ways. For the life of me, I can't figure out how ejecting a user group from the park system squares with any of those objectives and many others as are stated in your report. So I would encourage you to urge the Parks Department to welcome us back. I represent a group of users that for many, many years served a lot of the more underdeveloped and more remote areas of the state park system and provided some organization, some order, and some safety in those areas. And those areas are now empty. So I would urge you to urge the park system to welcome us back. Just one further point. Director Jarvis's presentation mentioned millennials, as does your draft report. Your report, in fact, notes that they represent about 60% of Californians and that they're the largest generation in human history. I have 2 millennial children, probably some of you do as well, and my experience with them and their friends would show that not only, as Director Jarvis, one of his slides mentioned, that they don't like to be dictated to, I would stress that they don't like to dictate. They don't make judgments on people's personal lifestyles. They don't make judgments on people's skin color, the shape of their eyes, or their philosophies. They make judgments on what they consider important to the future of the world and to the many, many challenges that our world now faces, which are unprecedented. In a few years, they're going to be your largest constituency. I would urge you to take into consideration that they think a lot differently from the way my generation thinks and your generation as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Next is Peter Dumont, and then Jeff Gaffney and Nancy Grauman. Hello, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Distinguished commissioners and Director Jarvis, thank you very much for coming all the way across the country. I'm here with a great deal of humility and boldness at the same time. I just wanted to acknowledge that. Humility from a point of organizational strength, boldness from the point of view of concept. And I do want to share my excitement about proposing a complementary state and national global monument to augment the iconic image of the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor. We have a beautiful harbor here. We have a state park called Angel Island right in the middle of that harbor, which gives a beautiful elevation. It's sweet to be natural, but the Golden Gate Bridge was criticized before it was built, that it would be a desecration on the natural environment. It has proved to be an enhancement. So we'd like to propose an elevated ring dedicated to peace and understanding and solidarity of the human race, guided by our highest common ideals. And since a picture is worth 1,000 words, unfortunately we don't have a concept picture, but our logo I would like to share. This stands for the idea of the successful, harmonious integration of diversity and unity, freedom and responsibility. But that takes values, and we promote values that are civic in nature as opposed to religious. However, more than just election policies and public policies in that regard, we're talking about goodwill, honesty, communication, cooperation, and celebration for common goals. So let me just read and conclude with the proposal and leave it with you. I don't know if we're early or late in the process. I think some of each. And we would need help, but one of our favorite slogans is teamwork to make the dream work. So the Star Alliance Foundation for All proposes a spectacular monument dedicated to cooperation and peace from sea to shining sea, to grace the peak of Angel Island and serve as a complement to the global iconic Statue of Liberty. Companion to a mobile floating aqua theater on the bay, which would be about a city block in diameter, and be able to go from port to port and take on audiences for democratic assembly, but also entertainment and cultural exchange. The elevated Ring of All Nations monument would provide spectacular 360-degree views from its multiple observation decks and restaurant, meeting, and display spaces dedicated to worldwide peace education, public service, and public parks. The upper deck of the Ring Monument will support heroic statuary, 30 diverse human figures gathered in a circle, hands clasped in solidarity, eyes upraised to a central fountain of stars representing humanity's highest common ideals. We have a more extensive concept paper of the ring for every nation on our website. Both structures, the floating theater and the elevated monument, would serve as prototypes for similar monuments and facilities recommended worldwide for interconnectable democratic assembly, public education, and inspiration. You know, Lincoln said, with public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. So State Parks owns this piece of land right in a central pedestal of water and other elevation in the bay. And just the vision of this by day and by night, as well as the attraction of specific visitors, would energize and ennoble the entire state park system and the parks concept worldwide.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your creativity.
Thank you very much.
All right, very good. That's most helpful. And next is Jeff Gaffrey, I think it is. Here he comes. Yeah, well, and it's also the glasses. I apologize to the woman from the Sierra Club. And then Nancy Grauman and Sam Hodder after those two. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairpersons Keogh and Khan and fellow commissioners and staff. Thank you very much. My name is Jeff Gaffney. I'm the president of the California State Park Peace Officer Management Association.
Welcome.
Thank you. Specifically wanted to talk about leadership within the department. We're very happy that we have this opportunity, and thanks to Secretary Laird and General Jackson for getting us to this place and turning things around and having the discussion. I think people would be surprised to hear that we are somewhat in agreement with some of the findings in the report that was released, and to some degree we feel that leadership within the department could use diversity within classification. We also don't think that excluding peace officers from that purpose is beneficial to the department. And Director Jarvis, thank you for speaking as well. I think he was talking about how they've gotten to the point now where peace officers don't feel comfortable and going over to the management side, and I think you lose something when that happens. We're here to discuss the fact that we're not cops that are running parks. We're park managers. We're people who got into these jobs. I think you'd be surprised to find out the diversity of classifications in which we started our careers. Our department, it's sort of a myth that you have to be a peace officer to become a manager, in the sense that you can start out as a maintenance worker, you can start out as an environmental scientist, and representative within our organization right now, the regional leaders, the district superintendents, the regional park managers, you'll find most of them started their careers in that capacity. They came in as an environmental scientist, they came in as an interpreter. As a matter of economics, probably more than anything, it was very efficient to include the peace officer role within that classification and make that part of the management structure instead of hiring a separate structure to manage law enforcement. So as a result, we have what we have, which is California State Parks. I look at how we compare ourselves to East Bay Regional a lot in recent reports. We compare ourselves to national parks. The reality is the culture we have is California State Parks. We need to stand up and say we are California State Parks, and this is what we're about. This is who we are. And so if you were to look at East Bay Regional Parks, for example, if you were to take their budget, which is about $120 million a year if you include the helicopters operating, and you extrapolate that out through the state parks, that's 2 counties that they cover, 58 counties in California, that'd be about $3.5 billion that it would cost to run our department. Do we have those kind of resources? As you compare the organization to other organizations, you have to keep that in mind. You also have to keep in mind that General Jackson makes more from his retirement from the Marines than he does as the director of the California State Parks Department. That carries all the way down through our entire department, so that as you pay people what they're worth, then you'll attract more people. And that can be discriminatory. You talk about diversity of people who come into our department. If you're going to pay them less, you shouldn't be paying people that you're attracting who have some diverse background. You shouldn't pay them less as well. We need to attract people with diversity. Probably want to go elsewhere because they're going to get paid better. Can I have a... Yeah, sure. I want to just, once again, we've talked with Ken and Melissa more than a couple of times, and we support a leadership academy. We think that there should be an opportunity for people to go together to a leadership academy, to build esprit de corps, to develop good, solid leaders within our organization. We also want to, and you may find this surprising, maybe you don't, we have currently of the 21 district superintendents that run parks, 30% of them are women. And so I think it would be helpful if we actually pulled out some of the demographics and looked at some of the stats. We do need to attract a diversity of classification and a diversity of personnel in general. But I would like to get some more data at least, and maybe we can roll through that and see where we appeal to that. Millennials, definitely. We need to attract those millennials, and that means that we need more diverse partners. We can't continue to look towards partners and volunteers. They're typically retired wealthy people. We need to look towards other types of diversity. I think that's called out to some degree in the report as well. And once again, We are an organization, thousands of years of parks experience. We're a group of people who came into the department because we love parks. A lot of us are Californians, native Californians. I'm a fifth generation native Californian. We believe in them. We want them to be successful. We're here to help. And Ken and Melissa, we've been working with them, and we've been out with Carol a couple times, and I'd love for any of you to come out with any of us and spend a day or spend a couple of days.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And next, Nancy Grauman, Sam Hodder, Donna Harrow, and Robert Doyle. And that's the last speaker I have. Welcome.
Thank you for your service. I'm Nancy Grauman. I serve as Director of Defensive Place, which was founded in 1997 by Huey Johnson as a project of his Resource Renewal Institute. Defensive Place works to protect parklands, open space, and nature preserves whose legal charters are threatened by sale, development, and predatory changes in use. We advocate for the principle of law that land set aside in perpetuity for preservation, public use, and environmental significance should never be sacrificed for economic or political motives. Any betrayal or manipulation of the donors or public's intent represents a loss of trust in all contracts that bind generations to a common heritage of land stewardship. We hope that your work brings new assurance to Californians that the environmental, recreational, political, economic, and administrative foundations of our parklands are fortified to withstand external and internal challenges. While the entire system is under scrutiny, I draw your attention to a single park, Washoe Meadows State Park in South Lake Tahoe, which exemplifies how environmental, recreational, political, economic, and administrative protections have failed. Betrayal of this park, established by legislative statute in 1984 for its rare and irreplaceable natural resources, occurred in January 2012 when, at the bidding of the previous Parks Administration, the Parks and Rec Commission reclassified an expanse of the park as a recreation area. This unprecedented downgrade of a legislatively established state park contravened the commissioners' roles as proxy trustees for lands held in public trust. The statewide Washoe Meadows community has tirelessly defended this parkland and the ideal of state parks protection. To this end, the community has presented innovative environmental, economic, and recreational models for South Lake Tahoe and the Tahoe Basin that uncannily presage some of the expected concepts of this commission. I end with comments about the Parks Forward process. As you may be swayed to put fiscal priorities at the very top, Defensive Place goes on record in opposition to an amplified reliance on public-private partnerships, commercial contracts, and nonprofit support as the elixirs for budget woes facing parks and the Natural Resources Agency. What might happen to state budgets when these partners move on to some other venture? Equally, or even worrisome, would these partners invest dollars or staff with no expectation for some degree of policy or operational control? We worry that the state's public lands could thus become vulnerable to for-profit and self-interest ambitions that seem initially advantageous, but could eventually lead to contrasting priorities and even forfeiture of the natural resources and recreational access promised to all Californians. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving us your remarks in writing. Very helpful. And now it's Sam Hodder. Welcome.
Thank you so much. My name's Sam Hodder. I'm president of Save the Redwoods League.
We'll reset that. You have more time. Ken is too strict.
Thanks, Ken. Well, you got the best part. Anyway, I can sit down. I want to thank all of you for all of the time and dedication and the extensive and really thorough process that you've pursued so far. And wanted to speak to the draft report that was issued last week. But I'll begin by saying that Save the Redwoods League is proud of the rich heritage that we share with California State Parks. Save the Redwoods League helped to establish the California State Park system back in 1927 and have been completing land acquisitions in the Redwood Range ever since. We've added land to approximately 40 state parks over the last 96 years. At an average of about 50% of its fair market value. We've helped to restore vast areas of the redwood forest and have worked to invest in the infrastructure and in visitor experience improvements within the California State Parks in the Redwood Range. And our donors have contributed more than $135 million to these projects over the course of our 96-year history. And our mission and therefore our future is really directly intertwined with the state of the California State Park System. So we're very enthusiastic about the process to create a strong and sustainable future for that department. Save the Redwoods League and our members and supporters will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with the California State Park staff and its leaders and with this commission in finding a sustainable future for these magical places. We have tremendous respect and appreciation for our colleagues on the state park leadership and staff, and we recognize that fundamental change is needed for them to be successful into the future. We commend the Parks Forward Commission and the CSP staff for recognizing the need for bold thinking and systemic change, and we strongly support the high-level vision outlined in the draft report. Much has been said about changing demographics, about urbanization of our state, about degraded park infrastructure and antiquated systems within the department, and the League applauds the effort to confront these significant challenges. Specifically, we endorse and support the efforts to retain and enhance a commitment to resource protection and to improving the visitor experience. We endorse and applaud the efforts to upgrade the budgeting and accounting systems, to encourage and reward creativity and flexibility and partnership in the field with the California State Park staff. And we're pleased to see that there was a goal to implement policies, create incentives, and generally foster a culture that embraces partnership and allows non-government organization partners more flexibility in bringing their good ideas, their financial support, and their resources directly to bear to the benefit of the vision and the mission of California State Parks. So I will quickly close to say that we're intrigued by the idea of a support entity and look forward to working with you and helping to shape that and work out the details. And most fundamentally, as the League embarks on its centennial planning, we turn 100 in 4 years. Many of our mission goals reflect those that were expressed in the vision, and we're enthusiastically looking forward to working with all of you in developing the details.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Appreciate your testimony. And we will go to Donna Harrow, and then the last speaker is Robert Doyle. Welcome.
Thank you. I'll make mine very short because some of my comments have been covered. I'm Donna Hallow. I work with Valley of the Moon Historical Society. We're the partner, we are the nonprofit operating partner for Jack London Park, and we've been at this for about 1.5 years, and I'm here with our executive director and one of our other board members. I read the report. I'm very interested in the part that hasn't been described, which is the implementation, because I think that's going to impact how all of us work together. Specifically, and I think both Tracy Torres and Senator Evans covered this comment maybe much more eloquently, but how will the support entity work? What would their authorities be? How will they be funded? How will they cooperate with support entities and partners such as us? So I hope that that's addressed going forward. Thank you.
And we've discussed Jack London a couple of times in conversations. So how are things right now in your partnership operations?
They are better.
Okay.
You want this on?
And you're so diplomatic too.
I'm sorry. What did you say?
I'm glad. I'm glad things are better, and we appreciate your testimony. And we think that there's lessons to be learned with Jack London. So your comments are especially valuable.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think Shiska Van Wyck, who's our executive director here, I know has participated in that, and any of us would be happy to give more input from our experience. But things are improving. Yes.
Very good. Thank you. And last is Robert Doyle. Welcome.
Good morning, and thank you very much, and thank you for the excellent and hard work you're accomplishing with a great deal of input and expertise from lots of areas. I've had the opportunity to speak to the Commission before, and I really want to focus on a couple of new items. In particular, I will mention once again that the critical decay of state park infrastructure just has to be addressed. It is, when you consider both the national parks, our regional parks in the East Bay,
as well as the state parks. Many of them were developed by the WPA and the CCCs in the 30s. A lot of the core infrastructure of the state park system is 1930s sewer, water, picnic tables, campgrounds, and it is no longer sustainable. It is great to consider types of options for funding and how that funding may be dispersed, but without a very significant investment in state park infrastructure, you will have both a decline in enjoyment of the public using those parks and the support for that system, so that's critical. But I also want to emphasize the importance of environmental education. One of the successes and core values of the East Bay Regional Park District is a long-term commitment started by William Penn Mott Jr. when he was our director before going to state parks and the national parks on environmental education. If you really want to reach kids, if you really want to have cultural relevancy, you get them in school. You get them outside learning with a bright environment, with health and walking air and good interpreters. You cannot put everybody in the classroom, and you cannot put every kid in a visitor center, but you can provide a very good environmental education program. We have now aligned our environmental program with curriculum with the Superintendent of Schools of California, so both 3rd and 5th graders are getting required courses as a part of history or biology when they go into our parks. So that is very important. That is how, in fact, you engage youth. That is how, in fact, you can reach people that aren't reached on just by their families going to a campground or using the parks. When I visit many state parks or our regional parks, what I see is people of brown skin in our parks. We don't have a problem with people that are representative of this state getting into the state parks and the regional parks, the local parks. We have a problem with reaching them and engaging them with the system itself. Why is that system important to them? How do they become better citizens and engage after they leave the park? And you can do that through environmental education. There's been a great deal of discussion about the importance of urban parks. Pragmatically, I'll be the first to say, if you want to have funding for state parks, you better go where the votes are, and that's in urban areas. So it is critical to engage urban cities throughout the state in the state park system and other parks. But I would question that you really need to create new state parks in every urban area. For decades and decades, the state park system supported local parks, regional parks, county parks through a per capita program, through local branch program that was never criticized, it was highly successful, and for the last 10 years that has not occurred. So if you really want to reach more people and partner, as the state park system is now doing, I want to compliment General Jackson and his staff for being very good partners to the East Bay Regional Park District. We already see those improvements. But if you really want to do a pragmatic approach that you can have the funding, you need to think differently about where those parks are. And the hard question is are the park boundaries for state parks what they should be? If you're surrounded by a national park or a regional park is surrounded by a state park, there really needs to be discussion of where the actual boundaries for the agencies to manage make the most sense. By watershed, by ridgeline, by viewshed, it needs to be looked at, and that's always been a sacred cow that no one was willing to change a boundary of a general plan, to change who was on the left and who was on the right. That is a best practice. That's an efficiency that could save a lot of money, and I would encourage a deeper look at that. So I just also want to mention that we are privileged to have Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. as one of our early planners for our park district, like state parks and national parks. Do not lose that vision. The Olmsted Plan was an excellent plan. It really defined the philosophy of state parks. Now it's our time to revisit that and to look at how we are meeting that commitment to that philosophy, but at the same time modernizing the system. So I really encourage you to look at a few more things as you're finalizing this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very, very thoughtful comments. Actually, all of them were, we really appreciate everyone taking the time to express their thoughts. So we'll move on to, and I know we're, I'll even say significantly behind, but I think the commissioners' presentations, if possible, could be, right on point. That would be good, and then we'll hear from Ken, and then we have nothing else to do but adjourn. So we will get there. So we have these papers on our desk, the draft report discussions.
Right, this was a guideline if we can put up the PowerPoints.
If we could start in the order that they are in the PowerPoint, so I will turn it over to Lance, and I think you're going to get a little support from John on this.
I am. You know, given the timing and the fact that the last thing you want to hear is for us to sit up here and regurgitate what is in the draft report, I thought I would talk for a moment about our process. As I mentioned earlier, the Commission is reviewing this draft report from staff at the same time the public is. I think it's been very helpful to hear a lot of the comments today. I heard many echoes of comments that have already come in from commissioners, and I would expect to see many of those reflected in the next round of the report. What I'd like to talk about at the very beginning, if we can pull up the first slide. Oh, sorry, I'm not. I was speaking a few weeks ago with someone who's done a ton of work transforming public sector agencies across the country, and I said, you know, where do you get the ideas? Where do you generate the ideas for the change that you try to implement? He said something very interesting. He said, in every situation I've ever worked in, hundreds of engagements, the ideas are already there. They're usually 2 levels deep in the organization, and they're just waiting to be found and implemented and given sort of light of day. And I have to say, I think everyone on the staff would agree that our process has revealed the exact same circumstance, which is, and I think we could probably trace every idea in this report back to a conversation with someone within the department. So just to be clear, none of us are claiming that these ideas are our own or that they're all that novel. They are actually reflective of many, many conversations from stakeholders. And so, because I think we would be hard pressed to find in this room anyone who would object to the vision that we've laid out here around youth and access and relevance. And in some ways, that's sort of the easy part. That's the what we're aiming for. The more difficult part is the how. And so, you know, Tracy from the Parks Foundation commented earlier, this is building on work that started in 2009. If you read the history section of the draft, you'll see it goes back even deeper than that. And you look at these series of recommendations that are all very similar, coming out again and again, and you have to ask the question, why hasn't more happened? Why have we failed to implement? And so we've asked that question. We've asked that question inside and outside the department. We've asked it of people around the country, even elsewhere in the world. And there have been a series of answers. You know, I think the real answer is there's no one thing you can point to, obviously. But I would categorize them in two ways. Folks within the department have said, well, we haven't had enough help from others. And in particular, we haven't had enough funding, and we need more partnerships. And then there's another answer to the question, which is we haven't helped ourselves, which is we can look within and say, well, there are ways we can improve our own processes, the way we allocate resource. And I want to address the point of funding because we're going to talk about it at the very end. The challenge with funding is, for those of you who were with us in our December meeting, we had a report from a financial consultant who came in and did an extensive review. The challenge when you try to build the case for funding is, because of a lack of investment in tools and a lack of process, the department is not yet in a position to present the most credible case for funding. Now, again, if I polled everyone in this group, I doubt there'd be a person who would be opposed to the idea that we ought to fund these parks a lot more than we currently are. I personally believe that. But I also recognize that, particularly in today's environment and a department that's trying to rebuild its credibility, we've got to go prove the case. And so the good news is the current executive team is hard at work at this. And we have the consultant that worked on the report in December is hard at work at this. We've got a team of internal people in the department who've committed extra time to helping sort of revise the whole way in which the department starts to build budgets and financial planning. It's going to be a long slog, but I just want to set everyone's minds at ease that we have not forgotten about the necessity of funding. It's a matter of building the case for it. Again, I don't want to restate a lot of the things that are in the report. I would also just like to talk briefly about leadership and staffing, and I think I'm going to let John, if he's still on, take the lead on that discussion, and then we'll if any other commissioners have comments on this section about building an effective department, I'd invite them to comment. So, John, if you're still there.
Yeah, can you bring up John on Skype?
I am. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Oh, looks like I need to comb my hair. Let me start out by thanking Patricia Jones for her shout out for Wahoo Land, which is University of Virginia, the #1 baseball team in the nation. So back to the subject at hand, though, leadership and staffing. All of you have read in the report where we've gone, and so a couple I'd like to just summarize. First, the Commission has a great deal of respect for the career employees and their unquestioned commitment towards their state park system and our state park system. And the Commission, we also understand the devastating impacts of the crises of the last few years and some of the things that Lance just talked about. And we are deeply appreciative as a group of the deeply thoughtful and thoughtful input from employees all through the system. And we also sincerely believe that following funding and public credibility, the quality of leadership that is clearly focused on the future and its challenge is perhaps the most critical requirement for success in the future. And consequently, we're honing our focus on some key recommendations, which include first, leadership both in the field and at headquarters that is drawn from the best of all the people available within the system and some from not within the system. Creation of fair opportunity for anyone from any profession, including but not limited to peace officers, to become superintendents. Secondly, recognize the absolute need for a highly professional law enforcement, security, emergency medical services, and search and rescue function in our evolving society, which is very, very different than it was even 50 years ago. Third, we recognize the requirement that all managers have abilities to effectively manage law enforcement functions, and believe that peace officers, on the other hand, should have greater opportunity to participate in the rest of the functions of the state park system. Fourth, we believe it's critical that new recruitment, training, and promotion inculcate the need to reflect California's ethnic and age makeup of the future. And finally, we are finding it essential that a culture of collaboration, innovation, and creativity is needed going into the future. Delegations of authority to allow the field greater flexibility, which are matched with risk tolerance in headquarters, must occur. I think these are the primary convictions that are reflected in our draft document, and unless there are questions or other comments, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Before I ask for any other comments from commissioners, just to follow up on what you're saying and share one more anecdote. You know, the bullet points you see here are ideas that have grown out of conversations, starting with staff and moving to other folks. The last one on there is operational effectiveness, which is, I guess, a fancy word for getting stuff done. And someone a senior member of the department said something to me which struck me a few months ago. You know, it's around this concept of both getting help from others and helping ourselves. He said, you know, why would I not go and seek out the smartest person in the world with the most experience in transforming agencies like the Parks Department? Why would I, if offered the chance to tap into that expertise, why would I not? And that sort of stuck with me as we've thought about how do we go find those experts and secure their services and get them involved in this. Again, with all, and there are 1,000 questions you could ask about how do you do that? How do you integrate? How do you avoid duplication? Those are obviously details that are being worked out. But what means a lot to me is that attitude is so critical to the transformation of the department and of the system, is that willingness to go and find the expertise wherever it lays, inside or outside the department. So I'd close with that and ask if anyone else has comments on this section. If not, we can move on.
I just want to say, with regard to this first section, having heard Director Jarvis speak today and having followed what he's done at National Parks since he's been there, I feel that what National Parks has done under his leadership really is a great model, and that we need to really focus on that, get all the information that's available from them as they move forward through their transformation, so that we don't, rewrite or think that we need to write ourselves how to transform our department. So I just wanted to emphasize the importance of that, and having him here today was terrific. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Carol. I think we'll move on next.
Right, and we'll turn to Carol to talk about the natural and cultural resources.
Did we skip a section?
Or did I?
Yeah, we skipped.
I think we skipped one.
Toby.
Yeah.
You're up, Toby.
Oh, okay. I just skipped right. Nice try.
Yeah. Toby.
Let's
Sorry. You want to turn your mic on there too?
I'm happy to let you do that because, or at least I would encourage you to go where you were going. I think for me, my observation is this part about the support entity is the most difficult piece of the puzzle. And understanding the very last item there, for instance, the organizational effectiveness, and tying that back into the prior slide, the last point of which is operational effectiveness. The question would be, if one takes each of those major responsibilities that are listed on the slides that you're looking at, and that we're all looking at together, how do you create a support entity that can be most effective and be sure that it is appropriately integrated with the department and its goals to be operationally effective? That is the topic we need to spend, all of us, need to spend a great deal of time working on between now and when the final versions of this report are created. My own interpretation is those of you who raised the question of what is this support entity going to do and what is it all about and what are the details, exactly the right questions. I had the same reaction when I read this draft. So I guess I say that to assure you that there's no great conversation or wisdom going on in some other set of rooms about that. It's too difficult. it will be where we need to flesh out among the commissioners, the staff, and the public what that means and just how the structure goes. But I think that's as far as we are right now, is to recognize that.
I'd just like to add to Toby's comments, he was focusing on the importance of integration with the department, obviously on these key matters like planning and business development. But we heard a lot today, which I really appreciated, from the many wonderful support organizations that are supporting these parks. And I think I also see this as a way to, the goal should be to take everyone's work to the next level. That's the goal of it, not to replicate, not to manage, not to take over, but just to acknowledge that collectively, with a bigger vision, we could, maybe raise some more resources and also provide services and support to enhance the work that all the support organizations are doing. And really, I think we'll need the support organizations to tell us what that means and if there is value, what the value added would be in that dimension.
Anyone else on this topic? No. I would just add to those comments a reiteration that this is another idea that maybe wasn't called a support entity that has kind of bubbled up from conversations both inside and outside the department. Inside the department, where there have been cases where key leaders have said, boy, if there was only a way I could get this done in a more streamlined way or in a different way, or if I had the resource, someone could lend me the resource to get this done, wouldn't it be great? They're just, they're gaps that need to be filled. Likewise, in conversations with we haven't been able to speak to obviously every support group, but we have had conversations with Save the Redwoods and with the Parks Foundation, who have indicated their support for this idea. Again, details to be worked out, with the key being avoiding duplication such that the benefit of this truly is additive in every way. So I agree with you, Toby, that this is probably the most difficult piece of the near-term work, but in my mind critical to part of the how of how we get to the what of the vision that is I think largely unobjectionable. So we'll move on next to Carol. You're going to talk to us about natural and cultural resources.
Thanks, Lance. So when we spend time in rooms like this, and I've spent a lot of time in rooms like this talking about parks, I realize that sometimes we lose track of what it is that we're protecting. And I think it's really helpful, and I recommend all of you at this time think of your favorite park. Find your park, like Director Jarvis just said, and I think you'll feel a lot better when you do. The natural resources that we have in the state park system, whether it's the redwoods, rivers, the desert, Lake Tahoe, which I would agree are some of the best parks. I don't know if the supervisor is here, but I love those parks. Yeah. How could you not love a park named Bliss? We have a very strong duty that we recognize on this commission to think of the central mission of state parks. Why was state parks founded? It was to protect the natural and cultural resources as outlined in the Olmsted report that Bob Doyle referred to. And I just want to say that for those of us on the commission, we hold that as our highest priority. We mentioned in the report, of course, that there's 1.5 million acres to protect of natural resources, and within those are some of the most historic, important cultural resources, historic resources, tribal resources, and all of these are at risk. I think that the commission agrees that because of a combination of things, some have been well-intentioned, the case of bond funds that, am I speaking into this thing? Good, thanks. In the case of, bond funds, which were so great, brought billions of dollars of natural resource protection, but we're missing the essential ingredients of operations and maintenance funding,
And so we have a lot of land, but we're either in some cases unable to open it or unable to protect it. That's true, but also with cultural resources, we have whether it's dilapidated bridges, septic water systems, more recently theft of redwood burls, which was, I thought, very alarming. We are underfunded, and we need to take aggressive action to change that to protect our natural resources. It's also the threat of climate change that we address in this section of our report. State parks has been engaged. They need to continue to be very engaged as climate change impacts the natural resources, and be a leader in educating the public on what are the impacts of climate change on natural resources, and why are natural resources like the redwoods, for example, so critically important in responding to climate change. So in our recommendations, we do recognize that partnerships have been pursued by the department, and that's part of what the department does, but partnerships need to become part of the DNA of the department. I think that, in my mind, I do not historically see state parks really aggressively reaching out to partners. Partners reach out to state parks, and partnerships are formed, but that needs to change. I think what we're talking about here is everyday park employees coming, managers coming in each day and thinking, what can I do to further partnerships today? And of course, that doesn't mean lowering barriers, which Tom talked about and the senator is concerned about. It means promoting the kind of partnerships that protect parks and enhance them and allow us to do the kinds of things that we all know are important to do. Along with the recommendation for the creation of a support entity for state parks, we're talking about, in the natural resource section, working with that entity to plan and manage for natural resources. And we've seen a little of this, certainly seen it as a result of AB 42, but we see, in East Bay Regional Park, certainly in LA, and really all over the state. But these kind of management structures that provide for resource management, innovative forms of resource management, we support strongly in the report, and we'd like to see whatever this interim management entity, well, not interim, excuse me, this other entity that we flesh out, have that involved. We also address in the natural resource section additions to the state park system. It's not something that we talk about very much, but there need to be additions to the state park system. For one thing, state park, what we're trying to protect, those things are going to be moving with climate change, and we need to figure out how to continue to protect them. We need to look at urban parks. We need to continue to address responding to the needs of a growing population here in California and growing numbers of visitors. So we recognize that that's a priority, and on the cultural resource side of things, we're recommending that the department identify structures that have the potential for adaptive use, that we're much more innovative in our approach to that, and we specifically recommend in this draft, and I hope that that continues to be part of the final document, that we execute at least 3 adaptive reuse projects in the first year, because we really do want to come up with specific points that we can say, well, we are accomplishing the recommendations. So we believe that working with the support entity will facilitate all the projects. That's the whole point of having it, that it'll coordinate funding and help make all of this happen in a shorter time frame. Thank you.
Any other commissioners have comment on this section? If not, I'll hand it over to Commissioner Wu to talk about access.
Thank you. The next section of the draft addresses some of the core issues that we've heard about this morning, specifically what can be done to make the state park system more relevant to the future population of the state. So this next section talks about both diversifying the population of who uses the parks, how to increase access to the state parks for those who don't currently use the state parks, and thinking seriously about what will be the future population of California and how the state park system needs to adapt to address the needs of the future population. In terms of places or geography. This refers both to getting urban residents out to the non-urban state parks, as well as the need to create, to find resources to create new state parks in urban areas. In other words, laying the groundwork for future expansion of the state park system in ways which address the future population of the state. Specifically, in the draft, there are a number of things which are called out. I'll call attention to a few of these. One, I think, is a very important recommendation, which is a time-specific recommendation. In other words, it sets a goal, a specific goal of 10 years, saying that the visitation patterns of state parks should more clearly represent the demographics of the state within 10 years. The recommendations also encourage more partnership between local, regional, and state parks to achieve that goal of increasing visitation. It calls for some specific a specific number of pilot projects which would create new state parks in urban areas. And also, again, looking at the possibility of future state bond funds and how those funds could be earmarked or dedicated to state parks in urban areas and other parts of the state which are likely to experience population growth. I can talk more about transportation, but you want me to stop here and okay. The next section of the document talks about transportation solutions, and even though I do have a background as an urban planner, I think the idea of adapting transportation systems to increase visitation of both urban and non-urban state parks is a new challenge I'd never really thought about very much. And what I found in the course of research on some of these ideas is that there are a lot of possibilities out there, and there are some existing programs out there, but one challenge is information, or the lack of it. That is, how to make the information available to potential visitors to state parks about how to overcome different parts of the transportation obstacles. This includes, for example, a proposal to create a state park version of a trip planner website or app. In other words, the same kind of app or website that you would use to figure out how to find the closest retail store you're looking for, or some other kind of amenity, could be adapted to enable a potential visitor to figure out how to put together the transportation, whether it's by driving or taking transit or other ways of getting to a state park. So that's one recommendation, to create a usable trip planner app or website to make that information more available. And there are a number of examples at the local and regional level which try to do this, but it would make a lot of sense to do it at the state park level. Also, we're calling for a number of pilot projects relating to transportation solutions that would build upon a number of the existing resources or potential resources that are out there. I found out, for example, that Zipcar, the car sharing company, is willing to consider offering a discount for people who want to use a car sharing vehicle to go out to a state park for a day trip. Someone else pointed out to me that there are some opportunities in terms of using the van pool vehicles that are used Monday through Friday by commuters, but which are typically unused on Saturday and Sunday, potentially using those vehicles for access to state parks, as well as other kinds of underutilized vehicles, including school buses, transit vehicles, or other vehicles that may be available. The last mile connection, that is, if we encourage visitors to state parks to take transit and not their personal car to get to a state park. There's a challenge that transportation planners call the last mile, which is that you may be able to get a certain distance by taking Amtrak or a commuter rail train or a bus, that will get you close to, but not quite to your final destination? And how do we pay for the connection that enables to get someone to get to a state park without using their car, but in a comfortable and user-friendly way? That's something which there may be some ways of adapting existing shuttle buses within certain state parks or other ways to close that last mile gap. But anyway, there's a lot of work to do relating to transportation, but there are solutions which do seem practical and available.
I just want to pick up on the last two bullets quickly, really related to what you were just talking about. There are a couple of what I call skunk works projects that have sprouted up as we've been working with the department. A couple of them relate to this digital tools bullet point. The first is when I first met General Jackson, he said to me, you know, it's really hard to figure out where to go to parks sometimes. You know, sometimes I'm not sure I want to go to a county park or a state park or a land trust. And so over the course of that conversation and discussions with other stakeholders, we've developed this idea of coming up with a tool much like what Commissioner Wu was talking about with transportation, but something that allows you to find a park, whether it's online or on your phone, regardless of whether it's a county or state or federal park or city park. You can just input the distance and the sort of things you're looking to do. Something very user-friendly. There's a lot of work going behind the scenes right now to develop a spec for that and to find funding and everything. So hopefully we'll have some better news to report on that over the summer. Related to that, the department has also been in discussions with a local internet search company, rhymes with frugal, that does a really cool thing with their cameras. They, if you're familiar with Street View on Google Maps, where you can sort of put the little guy on the map and see the actual street. They can do that same thing for trails and for campsites. And so the department is been in discussions with them about how to utilize that technology. And so that work is underway, and I think will be done in collaboration both with the company but also with a team of volunteers from some of the support groups. So look forward to some news there. Lastly, if you were at our commission meeting in LA, you may recall hearing the report on some of the market research that indicated that the availability of rustic overnight accommodations could be a real easy way to spike engagement, particularly by underserved and non-user communities in the parks. On the backs of that research, we've also, in collaboration with the department, been looking at how do we build some cabins and get them out there, reasonably priced, sustainably designed cabins. That work's underway. Dean Wu, in his capacity as dean, has some students in a graduate course working on some designs that, again, we'll expect to see some results from. And we're also working on sourcing some philanthropic finance for that effort to make it, to actually be able to get it done under our current funding circumstances. So again, those are things that we hope to be able to report on in our final report as having already been launched, and something we all look forward to seeing the results of. If there are any other comments from anyone, I'd move on to the health section. I'll see if there are.
Okay. Moving on. Excuse me. Moving on to the health report. I think we wanted to go beyond the diet and exercise as a way to promote health. That's kind of the typical soundbite that we always hear, and that the medical community tends to give people just diet and exercise. But rather, we wanted to look at the state parks really in a broader context and ability to both promote health outcomes and drive health outcomes, to drive economic value in our healthcare economy, and to educate the public around the value of health and engagement. So we looked at a number of things, and this is really based upon the notion that if you think about what myself and my colleagues do in healthcare, we're really focused on the 1% of the time that people are engaged with the healthcare providing community. So it's, if you're sick or you have some, you come and getting your annual shots and stuff, that's about 1% of your life at most. The 99% of the time, you're really not engaged with us. You're engaged in other things, and parks are part of that thing, and those other things that people engage with, and we have an opportunity to significantly change the health of our communities. So we looked at things such as creating partnerships with other healthcare organizations to try to both promote healthy behaviors, but also to look at parks and through a network of parks, both. And I think you heard Director Jarvis mention this, not just state parks, but city, regional, state, national parks, to create this mosaic of parks that can then be used, for example, to improve asthma hospitalization rates, or to to deal with issues around other specific health-related issues, and also that we can do that in conjunction with census and geocoding type of data to really, in a scientific way, address specific health needs. We talked about again the idea that we think from a health perspective it's important that our state parks are part of this larger mosaic, both to provide the resource, but also to integrate and coordinate programmatically. For example, the Healthy Parks, Healthy People program you've heard about. The state parks really have a role to play in those types of things as well. And then finally, we talked, I said diet, around the food options. You heard Director Jarvis mention with the national parks what's gone on there in terms of concessioner contracts and having buy-in around the types of foods that you'll encounter in the national parks. We feel that a similar approach can be taken in our state parks, which is not to say that you cannot find a French fry anywhere in a state park. Hopefully you won't find it on the ground because people have picked them up, but that there will be, this is an opportunity to both provide healthier food choices and also to educate the public around what some of those choices are. An example is I'm sitting here looking at Julie, for example, who's the Monterey Bay Aquarium. It's a huge program around educating around sustainability in terms of choices around seafood and things like that. That these are the types of things, ways in which we can have an impact on health and behavior. So those are the details are in the draft report, but those are really the ideas that we had. The other thing, the other footnote that I'll make, I think is important, is as we look at the parks as an asset, when those assets are potentially threatened or people raise the question about what's the value of this asset versus other things, I think it's always important to have in our armamentarium all the various components, so economic benefit of parks, the benefit in terms of civic engagement and engaging diverse communities, et cetera, et cetera. Well, health is one of those benefits of our parks, but I think too often we don't really think about ways that we can measure and quantify what that is. So that's also part of this concept, is let us be able to measure and quantify that. So if the question's ever asked, if we were to get rid of a bunch of parks, what does that do? Well, we can actually say, well, that's fine, but the cost of your health care for this population of California will go up by 35%. Well, okay, maybe we ought to rethink that. So I think that's where we're trying to go with this in this part of the report.
Thank you. Let's return to youth. Julie?
Okay, well, I don't know why youth always end up at the ends of these reports. That's interesting, because beginning with the end in mind, the youth really is probably the most important thing for us to focus on. But we've had some good conversations about this whole notion of engaging youth, which we know is very important. And I think we have some good ideas in this first draft. I think some of us feel that what we really want to talk about needs to expand a little beyond the K-12 audience, which this is quite focused on. But that being said, I think there's a wide acknowledgement of the importance of engaging youth, the whole nature deficit disorder issue, and I think we're really poised at an important time with the next generation science standards and Common Core standards coming out, and a big opportunity to have our formal school system better link with our outdoor spaces. And also, of course, we have a vast number of fabulous informal outdoor education entities being conducted by not-for-profits. So the main recommendation here really is to take all of that to the next step. I mean, we're using the words expand and strengthen all of these K-12 youth opportunities that the department is carrying out. I should say, though, that I think that the second bullet in this preliminary recommendation perhaps is the more important one, which is collaborate with and establish a strategy with all the huge array of other informal and not-for-profit partners conducting these services to take the work to the next step. I don't think that we believe that it's the state park system job alone to educate and engage the entire youth population of California, and I think this is an area where there's a huge opportunity for continued partnerships, really very little risk in terms of overlap or conflict in approach, because there are so many great programs going on right now and a huge need. I mean, science education barely even exists below the 6th grade level right now on our school system, and of course we also have the issue of kids growing up increasingly in the cities. And so that's sort of the nature of these recommendations. I guess more broadly, once we get done with this recommendation, we want to include here or somewhere else in the report somewhat broader statement, really focusing on the importance of engaging young people, including through the millennial age group, as really the next constituency for state parks. It's a business imperative. It's not just about the importance of science education. By business, I know that sounds like a for-profit term, but it's the future of the environmental constituency, the future population in California that will be willing to invest in this remarkable legacy that past generations have provided, that is absolutely in peril. And it's an imperative that we make a commitment to tangible goals to move that forward.
I agree with Commissioner Packard's comment about needing to not just emphasize K through 12, but also to build upon that in terms of young people a little bit older than the 12th grade. And there are some comments here which we hope to flesh out with more specific recommendations relating to the step of recruiting volunteers, interns, and workers. In other words, the logical next step beyond the initial exposure to the outdoors is getting young people involved as volunteers, interns, and paid workers. And also, the recommendations here emphasize the need to make a career path visible. In other words, it's not enough just to get young people interested, but in order for young people to think about working in state parks or other parks seriously as a career, they need to know there's a future. They need to know that there's some upward mobility for them. Not that it doesn't necessarily exist, but we need to make that career path visible in order for young people to take it seriously as a future direction.
Any other comments on this? Commissioner Kehoe, funding.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Lance. I think actually at the start of this section of the agenda, Lance Kahn made some important points about the funding issue. And we know it's critical. I don't think anyone on the commission would argue that parks needs more funding and better funding. And that there are well understood tools for how to get there, voter approved bonds, extraction or natural resource fees, driver's license registration, etc. But before there is public support for either passing a bond measure or passing a piece of legislation that would levy these taxes or fees, we need to, I think, make a case that the department is working hard, and it is, but we need to make the case public that the department is working hard to be more efficient and responsive and to look at innovative ways to help itself and build confidence amongst the public that good work is being done and by dedicated people, and that the parks are worth the effort and worth the additional funding. So we're going to work more on that, and we welcome your discussions. And we all need to get beyond the fact or the simple statement that we need to have more money coming into the system and better ways to spend it. We need to build a case for those things happening. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Lance.
Thanks, Chris. Before we turn it over to Ken to talk about next steps, I just thought to wrap up this section, I think it's fair to say that the report as it currently stands is obviously builds on a history of a lot of other hard work prior to this commission being impaneled. And that we're at a stage where we haven't quite answered the question of how. If you look at the list of things we've just discussed, for every one of those bullet points, you could ask the question, okay, so who's in charge? How are you going to get it done? How are you going to pay for it? What's the timeline? I want to set everyone's expectations about what is reasonable for this commission to produce, and that's not a way of talking down our abilities, but just the reality of the time frame we have and the complexity of these problems. I think it's not realistic to expect that come this fall you're going to see a full-fledged implementation plan around every one of these bullet points. I wish we had the time. I wish we had the resource to do that. Instead, what you're going to see in this next iteration, if my sense of the Commission's comments to date is accurate, is that we're going to focus on some of the priority recommendations that really set the table for getting stuff done, for implementing all those bullet points. That is the critical step that has truly been missing in a lot of the prior efforts, which is designing some structural recommendations that actually greatly increase the likelihood of all these advisory recommendations actually happening. And that's not to deprioritize all these other things we've talked about, but I think we're just very cognizant of the failures to create this change in the past, and we're really working hard to figure out what are the sets of structural changes that really will accelerate change. Again, I don't want to speak for the Commission, but in conversations, I think it's fair to say that there's consensus to date that we very clearly need to go and find the very best expertise we can in terms of transformation of public sector agencies and inject some of that talent in the right way, in the mission respectful way into the department. And again, what's very heartwarming for me is both at the field level and at the senior level, that concept has been very welcome, which signals to me that there's a real sea change in thought around how the department can both help itself but get help from outside. And then, so I think there's, as I said, these structural changes that set the table, and then ask, whether there are. We'll set the table in the sense that we can identify where there are new tools and expertise that we can bring in to advance some of these the bullet points here. I think that will go a long way towards starting to rebuild the credibility when we go to ask for funding or a dedicated source. And I also think it will further, by definition, will further enhance the already existing collaborative partnerships that exist. Because if there's anything that's clear to me is that no one's going to do this on their own. We all have constraints and limitations on what we can have done, what experiences we have, what expertise. And so again, I remain very optimistic, and I've been very encouraged by just the tremendous amount of input and collaboration to date. We're doing everything we can to both solicit but internalize the input that we've heard today, that we'll hear in ongoing hearings and forums. And so we ask for your patience as we continue to build out the detail, and we look forward to engaging with all of you to get your input as we put more flesh on the bone of our report. So thanks again for everyone's attendance. And Ken, do you want to tell us what's next?
Right, and it's about putting that flesh on the bone and setting the table and getting information back to the commission. In May, we will go back to the Parks Department employees, or as like Matt said, the answers are down there. We want to get more specific. We want to get more focused. We want to bring the perspective of priorities back to the commission. We want to do the same with the public. And so in June, there'll be the 3 public workshops with the idea, again, the public can bring us as specific reactions to the report and the focus and the priorities as you see them, so we can bring that to the commission and then give the commission time to process it and work a report. We pushed hard this time. We need to give the commission more time, and they've clearly made that clear. So we're coming up with a timeline. That's why I'm not announcing a date today. It's sometime between August and November. We'll have a couple meetings, but we're not going to do it until the commission has had time to take all this information, process it, and come back to you again with information and get it done in a timely manner, but to make sure they have time to work on it together. So with that, we will expect to come up with a timeline. It's very tough to get these 12 people together in the same place at the same time. So just that alone will be a counter guiding timeline, but to make sure that we have enough time and can continue this very positive engagement. So we'll be announcing that as soon as we can and put that together. But we know that we will be coming out with the June dates very soon. So to the public, we say we look forward to further engaging and talking more specifics and building out this plan.
Say, since August 6th, I think it's already on the calendar, we should try to keep that. Maybe not, but
right.
Let's aim for it.
We'll aim for it, but we want to make sure, because some commissioners have expressed the concern that might be too soon, so I want to honor that and see if we can make it work. But I will come to you with a timeline that you all agree on is going to work. But we need to really lay that around the dates are available and the time you need to work on it. So that is, if I can say yes, we'll hold on to August 6th, but we may need a little more time just to putting it together and making sure this all gets to you.
Got it. Thank you. To the commissioners, any final comments? Again, we thank the public for your input. We really do appreciate it, and I think we've concluded the agenda. Lance, any? Okay, so we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody, for being here.